Welcome to Fanfiction Audiobooks. Marvel Salted Fish Kryptonian. Chapter 61 Exclusive Restaurant. Chef, give me a steak. I feel so hungry that I could eat a cow. Henry came to the restaurant in the rest area of the set, where there was an exclusive team of chefs hired by the production team. The chef is a black man with a wide frame, probably one of those people with a waist that's almost as wide as his height. No one knows for sure if he knows how to cook, but you can be sure he knows how to eat. The chef walked out of the lounge, adjusting his chef's hat. Even though there wasn't a single hair on his head that could fall into the food, he still meticulously groomed himself. When Lao He saw the person coming, he laughed heartily and said, "Henry, the filming has just ended." Henry picked a few flavors from the overflowing donut table and piled a plate full. He poured himself a cup of black coffee and said, "There's nothing I can do. The director has very high standards for the visuals. If there's any mistake in the positioning, we have to start over. Every time everyone fails, the props team has to reset everything before reshooting. If they keep doing this for a few times, it would be strange if they could save time. It's not you who's holding them back, is it?" Lao He said with a smile while frying steak. "If I were the one holding back, I'd still be listening to the assistant director's lecture. I could have come to you for dinner first, you know." Lao He asked curiously, "Could it be that those two groups are looking for trouble again?" Henry grumbled, stuffing his mouth with a donut, "There are 3 producers alone. Unless Mr. Siegel steps in, no one will submit. It's only natural that when the player plays chess, the pieces suffer." Besides lead actor and producer Steven Seagal, the other 2 producers each had their own supporters within the team. They might not dare to openly confront or sabotage the production, but they would certainly try to make things difficult for their opponents. "Then how did you manage to stay safe? Do you have a stronger backer? Tell me. Why would I rely on an underwater volcano? I'm just a random actor signed by the Screen Actors Guild, a retail investor, not even qualified to be a pawn. How could anything implicate me? Besides, no one's watching me, isn't that better?" Henry was speaking the truth. As a relatively unknown figure on the set, he was happily getting freeloaders from his boss. Thinking back to his own dreams before crossing over, they'd simply been about doing nothing all day and still getting paid. Now that they'd been realized, how could he be dissatisfied? So as a passerby actor with no background or backing, Henry had no one to take care of him. While being ostracized by all parties, he was also like sitting in a special seat watching the show. Anyway, the pay can't get any lower. Even if there's no last shot, and it's all cut out in the editing, I'll get a day's pay for every day I'm with the cast. After flipping the steak over, Lao He asked again, "I heard that Erika Ilenico joined the crew today. Have you seen her? Is she as hot as Shawnee in Baywatch?" He gulped down his coffee and swallowed the donut in his mouth. Henry exclaimed in amazement, "Oh my god, you can't imagine what it feels like to see her in person. I was so close, I could almost feel her orchid-like breath. I could see the pulse of blood flowing through her skin. A turn of her head, a flick of her hair, a frown, a smile, everything was vividly played out before my eyes. This feeling can't be obtained from a screen, whether it's a TV screen or a big screen in a movie theater. You have to see her with your own eyes to feel that kind of living beauty. No wonder so many wealthy and powerful people aren't satisfied with just seeing them on screen. They're willing to pay a hefty price just to get a glimpse of them." Henry's words were not an exaggeration at all. When they met by chance on the set, even though he had seen all the D-slot goddesses before the time travel, his eyes were attracted by her beautiful face and nice figure. This was a real lesson for Henry, who thought he had seen countless women. What you see on the screen is really different from seeing the person in person. Old Black used a large fork to press the steak onto the iron plate, making a sizzling sound. He grinned and said, "Mad fake, just listening to what you said makes me crazy. You know, Erika made her film debut in Steven Spielberg's sci-fi blockbuster, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, playing a schoolgirl who has her first kiss with the main character. I thought she was so adorable. When she became a Playboy magazine playmate in July 1989, announcing her high-profile return to the entertainment industry, I was really looking forward to her performance. Shawnee in Baywatch made me fall in love with this girl completely. It's a pity that I haven't seen her come to the restaurant to eat until today. Otherwise, I would definitely treat her with my signature dishes and make her fall in love with me after eating them." Lao He put the fried steak on a plate and brought it to Henry, who had finished most of the donuts. Since it's not a regular steak restaurant, there are no side dishes besides the steak. If you want vegetables, the salad bar has everything. Henry skillfully cut into pieces with his knife and fork, stuffed a bite into his mouth, and began his usual criticism. I really don't mean to be disrespectful. Chef, did you learn your cooking skills from the British or the Germans? Lao He grinned, revealing a row of gleaming white teeth. He said, even if your taste is pickier than a Michelin star, my Le Cordon Bleu diploma is not fake. Henry sneered as he continued to eat his steak. That's all the stuff they teach at Le Cordon Bleu. Looking over, I saw a plate full of carbohydrates. Whether it tasted good or not was another matter, but it was definitely filling. It was steak, cooked in a rather unrefined, cowboy-style style. If a Michelin 3-star chef saw this, they would have a cerebral hemorrhage first. Blackie said with disdain, come on. No matter how good the food is, delicious or not, it can all be swallowed up in America with tomato sauce. Believe it or not, my baked snails wouldn't be any more popular than those donuts over there. So, you're just being perfunctory like that. Did you underpay the production team? Lao He said seriously, to be honest, the salary is quite high. But I also find it strange. I usually prepare food for those wealthy people, and I take care of everything from the wine to the top quality ingredients. This is my first time being the exclusive chef for a film production team, and I have to be available 24 hours a day. If the pay was less, I wouldn't have taken on such a job. Henry asked, didn't some producer hire your team? I've met those people. But their circle wouldn't hire me. At first, I thought I might run into former clients on set, so I worked diligently for a few days. But I didn't see anyone I knew, so I'm even more confused than you are. Chapter 62 Hometown Food. Of course, Henry, a marginal figure, had no answer to the chef's question. Following the principle of making the best of a good situation, Henry said, never mind all that. As long as everyone enjoys the meal, your mission is accomplished. And you've found the secret to success, haven't you? The two of them looked at the newly replenished donut table, salad bar, and high-end coffee machine. The hard-working American people are so easy to fool. If they really tried to make molecular cuisine or mushroom and clam soup, they would flip the table right over. Wild boars really can't handle fine bran. However, looking at the perfunctory dining table, which would have more variety even during normal meal times, Lao He still asked with a guilty conscience. Do you think I should make some changes? If my boss sees this, will he think I'm not responsible enough? In other words, this job is actually a test. Henry spoke the truth, no matter how good a dish is, it's put on a big plate and people can take it as they please. Then everyone can choose whatever they want to eat. Once you do that, even if you use top-notch ingredients, that plasticky, cheap feeling will stick. So, do you have any ideas? These days, the only person who can chat with Lao He about cooking, and not just for commercial hype, is Henry, a random actor. As a chef, Blackie could tell whether Henry really knew how to eat or just followed the crowd. That was why he asked Henry what he thought at this moment. Maybe, you could try your hometown cuisine. I think really rich people would get tired of French, Italian, and Spanish food. What kind of hometown food can I expect? Old Black, not being Chinese, didn't have that much nostalgia for hometown food. He muttered, do you want to see roasted bananas, boiled bananas, dried bananas, banana platter, banana paste, and banana soup here? Henry frowned and asked, why are they all bananas? Hey, bananas are a staple food back home. Just like rice in Asia and bread in Europe and America. Do you want to know more about cooking with bananas? I'm really inspired by what you said. Oh, God, please, have mercy on me. That face of yours makes me feel like I'm going to drown in bananas right now. It's okay not to eat bananas. There's a very special dish popular in my hometown, roasted lion. Lao He said mysteriously. This mention made the stunned Henry's eyes widen. He said, you guys are playing so wildly, you can even roast a lion. Yes, this is a traditional dish of our hometown. Every time we send 3 to 4 hunters to hunt lions. Wait a minute. Henry interrupted Lao He and asked, it's said to be a traditional dish, what weapons do you use? Just a spear. You can't use a gun. It would taste different if you used a gun. So? Using only spears, 3 or 4 men were able to hunt a lion. You guys are quite skilled hunters. Lao He snorted twice and said proudly, because once a lion is well fed, its desire to attack and its ability to move will decrease. Then the remaining person can kill the lion and bring it back to the village to barbecue. Woo, wow! You guys in the village play so wildly. Henry was shocked. This is the fairest way to choose a chief's daughter when multiple warriors want to marry her, because usually only one will return. Who can say that a warrior who can hunt a lion is not qualified to marry the chief's daughter? Henry shook his head and sighed. Wow, this is unimaginable. This kind of food has already transcended the level of delicious or not delicious. Lao He, who was originally speaking seriously, suddenly showed a happy expression. His 2 rows of large teeth were particularly white and shiny. He laughed heartily and said, "Haha, I scared you, didn't I?" "You? Oh, you must be kidding." Henry raised his hands in surrender and said, "You're amazing, chef. You really are amazing. You really had me intimidated. I almost thought all you lion hunters were so wild." The 2 men exchanged a black fist bump, and the smug old black man said, "Maybe I wasn't just talking nonsense. I heard it from my grandfather." My grandfather then said he heard it from his grandfather. But you know, there's no written history, only word of mouth. Who knows what's there? It's just old people bragging, trying to win over their grandchildren. Well, what do you say? Clear and foolish eyes of admiration. Yes. It's that clear, yet foolish, look of admiration. Those who want to be big stars, don't they particularly like to be looked at that way? Just like my elders, when they can't fool the adults, they have to fool the children. Who knows? Henry quickly finished everything he had taken and drank a large glass of soda. Because this is a film set in its working hours, the restaurant doesn't serve alcoholic beverages. Otherwise, the producers would be furious watching a group of actors and crew members filming drunkenly. Not to mention that the producer would also get drunk. Even the drunkest would explode on the spot when he saw the financial account books. Suddenly, Henry's ears twitched, and he quickly cleared the table, placing the plates and cutlery in the recycling bin. He said, "Oh, I should go check out the set. Maybe they're getting ready to film again." Go, go. Lao He certainly knew that the people here were more focused on filming and it was impossible to force anyone to stay. Henry's words were certainly not nonsense. Under his super hearing, the assistant director in charge of the passerby actors began to gather the previously disbanded actors to prepare for the next shot. In film crews, most of the passersby actors are handled by several action teams. Their method is very simple, that is, to send one person to follow the assistant director frequently or to stay on the set. As long as the filming team needs people, they can find people for their own team as quickly as possible. But there was a problem. Henry didn't belong to any action team, so when they called for people, they didn't include Henry in the group. It's not their fault, as it's not anyone else's fault. While it's a little unreasonable to expect actors to be on call all the time, it's even more ridiculous to not be there when filming is needed. This was Henry's current situation. Although he wasn't being specifically targeted, he was still being marginalized. However, this exclusion was not a malicious act. It was just that others had no obligation to help him, so Henry could only find a solution on his own. After all, he wasn't part of anyone's team, and Henry hadn't considered joining any small group. Fortunately, Kryptonians have the ability to superhear and can solve small problems like this. As long as Henry made his actions and behaviors look natural and got lucky enough to just walk back and not delay the filming, then no one would bother him, so why not do it? Chapter 63 San Diego Naval Base. The filming in the studio quickly came to a close. Next up would be the highlight of the film, the scenes on the warship. However, when the entire team arrived at the filming location at the San Diego Naval Base, Henry was shocked by the scene before him. You should know that most of the scenes in the movie Devil War are on warships, so finding a warship to cooperate with the actual shooting is the most advantageous way. By doing so, not only can the scene be restored realistically, it is real, but it also saves a lot of money on setting up the shooting set. But it requires the cooperation of the US Navy. This movie was the best action movie of the year before Henry traveled through time. It's undoubtedly the best movie anyone without a girlfriend would watch. Because I like this movie, I also took a look at some of the stories behind the scenes. Moreover, during the release period of the movie, in order to increase the box office, all kinds of news will be bombarded non-stop, so naturally I know more related news. For example, the main stage of the film is set on the USS Missouri, the only active battleship of the US military. However, the interior shots were actually filmed on the USS Alabama, a decommissioned battleship used as a museum ship. The submarine used by the villain is played by the Gato-class submarine HMS Drum, which served during World War II and was also retired as a museum ship. The only shots of the USS Missouri that actually appear in the film are exterior scenes of it sailing in Pearl Harbor, the Pacific Ocean, and San Francisco Bay. As for the battleship's command room where the final decisive battle took place, because it had sustained considerable damage, the military certainly would not allow the film production team to arbitrarily install explosives and explode in what could be considered the heart of the battleship. Even if it's just a retired museum ship, it's unacceptable to have any traces of bullet blasting left on it. Moreover, if the filming is actually done, there is also the concern of exposing military equipment. Don't think that just because these are antiques from World War II, their exposure is okay. The value of some equipment lies not only in its core, but also in its layout, which is a secret that cannot be made public. Therefore, the scenes in the command room were shot using a set constructed elsewhere based on information provided by the military. This was the portion that had previously been filmed in the studio. Other shipboard scenes involving explosions or destruction are handled in the same way. Just because the US Navy lends a ship as a filming location doesn't mean the production team can mess around with it. Under these circumstances, Henry originally thought the production team would go to Mobile Bay, Alabama, to film, as the battleship Alabama is stored there as a museum ship. Whether it is to reactivate the mothballed battleship or simply use a tugboat to tow the Alabama to San Diego, the cost is much higher than transporting the entire crew and equipment to Alabama and then transporting them back after the filming is completed. But what Henry didn't expect was that he actually saw a giant monster with the number 63, a total length of 270 meters, and a standard displacement of 45,000 tons in the San Diego naval port. It was the third ship of the Iowa class, the battleship Missouri. Besides the unmistakable serial number, another obvious feature is that the secondary gun emplacements on both sides of the bridge have been converted into missile launchers, which are also the locations where the Tomahawk cruise missiles are launched at the end of the movie. This is the result of a modernization, not the original Iowa class design. Seeing familiar staff members loading photographic equipment onto the active battleship, Henry, the Kryptonian who had traveled from Krypton, was stunned. This world is too magical. Just making a movie, and they actually use active battleships. It wasn't some decommissioned, sealed hunk of metal, its weapons mostly dismantled. It was the largest, bloodthirsty, and devastating weapon of war ever created. An aircraft carrier was merely a combat platform, it couldn't be compared to it. It feels like making an anti-terrorism movie, but they actually drag the US military to the Middle East, beat up some local armed forces, and let the production team film it. Is this a fucking film creation or a documentary? Seeing a familiar assistant director walking by, Henry asked in surprise, "Brother, are we really going to shoot a movie on this monster?" "Really? I have this opportunity thanks to our heroine." The assistant director was unloading boxes of materials from his car. Henry saw that he couldn't finish the work by himself, so he picked up 2 boxes, one on the left and one on the right, and followed the assistant director, quietly asking, "I heard that Mr. Siegel and other producers seem to have used the female lead position to date a lot of girls. Doesn't Erica have any connection with them? People feel distant simply because the topic is inappropriate and they are reluctant to talk too much. This is also the difference between social anxiety and social addicts." Henry and the assistant director weren't exactly close, just colleagues on the production team. But when it came to gossip, especially about girls, who wouldn't enjoy a chat? Henry, in particular, helped with the moving and was very tactful with his words. He didn't directly ask how many women our producer had slept with, or who they were. If he had asked such a question, he'd have been worried he'd have reported it to reporters or tabloids. But since it's just an appointment, we can talk about it. So the assistant director took a few steps closer to Henry and said in a low voice, "Actually, Mr. Siegel originally wanted another actress who could cooperate. Erica was not the first choice. But you know, without the military's assistance, we'd have to build sets or use models. Not only would the visual quality be significantly reduced, but we also don't know how much the production costs would increase. In order to connect with the military, we found a suitable candidate." The other party directly persuaded the US Navy to agree to lend them an active battleship as a filming location. In exchange, the choice of the leading actress, well, you know. So as the only female star in the production team, if we don't consider those female stand-ins, who wouldn't be interested in her? But who in Hollywood dares to make a move? The power for sex trade in Hollywood has devoured countless women with unique conditions, forcing them to use themselves as bargaining chips, negotiating terms in a hidden public space. But if behind a certain woman is a person who can pull out the active battleships of the US Navy for a stroll, wanting to touch such a woman is definitely a prelude to an accident on the set. Since they had a main gun that could fire, then if it misfired, killing someone, that would be a perfectly natural and unexpected event. No one could find fault with it. Anyway, at the end, just put a subtitle at the beginning or end of the film, "We especially remember someone," or add a sentence "Thank you for his efforts," and the matter will come to a successful conclusion. The film studios can also hype up the incident and increase the exposure of the film. Celebrating a funeral with a happy event is a great way to kill two birds with one stone. Chapter 64 A Day in the Extras. In the narrow company passage, a group of men with rifles were firing recklessly. Henry was among them, at the end of the group. Suddenly, a bear-like man rushed out from his hiding place, shot down the person standing in front with a flying knife, and took advantage of the blind spot to advance. Then came a few powerful blows, and everyone fell to the ground. Henry, who was standing at the end of the team, was not able to stay out of it either. Instead, he was hit by a chokehold. He flew up on the spot and fell heavily to the ground as if he was hit by a truck. The man who took action walked through the passage without looking back, carrying a beautiful woman with short golden hair wearing a jacket and whose lower body seemed to be missing. Cut. Okay, everyone get ready for the next scene. The director shouted with a large metal loudspeaker. Immediately, the staff behind the scenes began to adjust the equipment, preparing to change to different angles and take different shots. These shots will be used for the main character's constant actions inside the battleship. In fact, it is just repeated shots from a few different positions and angles. After all, this is an active warship, and it's impossible to let the production team run around all over the ship. So by repeatedly shooting shots of them entering and leaving from different angles and directions, the illusion of their movement can be created through subsequent editing. Henry, who had just been killed, stood up like the other passers-by actors, and then another group of people would take over to play the defeated villains. But this doesn't mean Henry can just wrap up and go home. Now he has to die several times every day to help the director accumulate as much footage as possible for editing. Anyway, when making a movie, there is no rule that people can only die once. Which shot will be used in the end depends entirely on which shot of the protagonist is suitable for stringing together a plot, regardless of whether Henry's death is exciting or not. Of course, it's also possible that none of the scenes were cut. Henry wouldn't appear in a single shot in the final film. This kind of thing is common for a random actor, who is, after all, a background character on the same level as the trees and walls. Actors who belong to other action teams naturally have people from the same team temporarily take on the work of assistants, such as handing them towels and checking whether their costumes and makeup are damaged and need to be replaced or touched up. Henry is alone and has to do these things by himself. The reason everyone checks this out is because Steven Seagal's fight scenes look very real on screen, with every action and reaction perfectly timed. Not too early, or it'll look fake, but too late, and it'll really hit you. If you were to be hit hard by this male protagonist who is also a martial arts coach, you would be seriously injured if not dead. That's why Henry, who doesn't belong to the action team, also gets to work as the villain who gets defeated. The filming schedule on the battleship was incredibly demanding, as it required too many actors to be on set. To avoid delays, everyone was constantly injured, then back on set. As long as they weren't killed or maimed, they had to take turns on camera. This was something that they had been longing for, but it turned out to be like torture, causing the actors great distress. No wonder stuntmen often accuse Steven Seagal of using filming as an excuse to assault them, and even make the incidents reported in the news. It wasn't difficult for Henry to coordinate these shots, he just had to act like he was being knocked down at the last moment. He didn't dare let the male protagonist really hit him. If the male protagonist hurt himself while hitting him, he would be blamed for it. But as a defeated villain, even if Henry wasn't injured like the others, it's impossible for him to be present in every scene. So the opportunity to shoot should be given. Those who were not currently filming had to go to the rest area on the battleship to wait. The passages at the filming location were too narrow, and if a bunch of unrelated people were crowded there, it would undoubtedly hinder filming. The rest area was planned on the deck, with a cordoned-off area. The film crew was not allowed to leave the cordon, and the officers and soldiers on duty on the ship were not allowed to enter the cordon. In theory, this is the arrangement. However, the crew's rest area was equipped with snacks and drinks, as well as ashtrays for smoking. For American soldiers who were accustomed to extortion, not reaching out was even more painful than killing their parents. Of course, the production team couldn't prohibit the soldiers from using the rest area. Even if someone crossed the line, as long as the supervising military police didn't say anything, the crew pretended to be unaware of the ban and chatted freely with the soldiers. Henry went up to the deck and came to the side of the ship. The Missouri did not leave the port, but remained at the berth. In the movie, the scenes on the deck surrounded by the sea were produced in post-production. Also because the battleship stayed in the port, this huge steel behemoth was not affected by the wind and waves, and moving on it was as stable as walking on land. Being asked if you get seasick during an audition is completely unnecessary. This side of the rest area faces the port, and there is a gangway next to it, allowing you to disembark at any time. This was convenient because the production team had a lot of supplies and equipment mostly stored at the dock. Items that were not immediately needed were not easily brought aboard, including temporary makeup areas, changing rooms, etc., which are also on land and not set up on the ship. Henry poured himself a cup of coffee and drank it in one gulp. He then crumpled the paper cup and threw it in the trash. Then he walked to the smoking area, lit a cigarette, and chatted with a group of old smokers. Although he accidentally learned the movie secrets of this different universe, Henry's life did not change at all, and he didn't even have the desire to find out who that mysterious figure was. I often hear the saying, when you stare into the abyss also stares into you. This isn't just something you can only apply to indescribable things, like the beginning of some strange event. It can be applied to any place or anyone. When an investigation is launched into someone or something, traces are bound to be left. When the opponent is not an ordinary person, one's actions are likely to alert the enemy and force them to pay attention to oneself. Henry wished he would never come into contact with people of that level. How could he be interested in a person who could mobilize active battleships and start an investigation? How is this any different from reminding others to pay attention to themselves? Do you think your life is too comfortable? Anyway, the target wasn't me, the other party was after the heroine. Our relationship was just that we were filming on the same movie set. Moreover, she is the heroine who is the focus of everyone's attention, while I am just an insignificant background actor. Even if I want to get close to her, I will be disliked. So Henry smoked his cigarette with peace of mind, tapping his fingers lightly on the railing of the ship as if playing the piano. Chapter 65 Piano Fingering. Is your fingering for Liszt's piano music? Asked a sailor who came over. Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, a noisy classic, isn't it? Henry replied directly. He then added, I've been reading a book about pianos lately. Unfortunately, there's no piano at home, so I can only move my fingers and pretend there's one. Aha, your fingering and movements are quite standard, so I can recognize it. Have you been learning this for a long time? It's not customary to give cigarettes to everyone in the US. But offering a cigarette to a fellow smoker is still a good way to start a conversation. So Henry pulled the pack from his breast pocket and flicked out a cigarette. The sailor didn't refuse. He took a cigarette and lit it. After taking a long drag, he said, I have an old piano at home that I really like and have studied for a long time. I joined the army to save money for music school. Henry poured cold water on him and said, if you join the army because you need money, can you become a pianist in the future? Can a child from a poor family become an international piano master by learning piano? Want to eat fart? What is real is increasing employment opportunities for piano teachers. The sailor, feeling cold, said with a wry smile, you are not being tactful at all. Henry pointed his finger and said, to succeed in music, you need to have money and both parents in the same profession. If you want to succeed on your own based solely on interest, it's not impossible, but it's too difficult. Only if you have this kind of awareness can you use the money you earn from military service to study music. Wow, you're talking just like my mother. Are you trying to be nice? Do you know Brian May, the guitarist of Queen? Henry asked. The sailor nodded. Henry said. He majored in physics and mathematics in school and also taught. Music was just his hobby, and talent was the key factor in his success today. Even without music, he still had a chance to work properly. If you want to spend money to go to music school just because you like it, without considering how to make money in the future, then most of the people here will be what you will look like in the future. Henry pointed at the passers-by actors chatting in the lounge area. Those leading actors, including the protagonists and supporting actors with lines, rest in another area, which is more comfortable. The sailor recognized them, of course. There weren't many actors here he was familiar with. Curious, he asked, aren't you making money? Why is it different from what I heard? The ones making money are the big stars. The people you see here only make money when they have a role to play. When there's no work to do, they have to find odd jobs, otherwise they can't even pay the rent. Tell me, are we making money? Henry's description applied to most people, not himself. With his crab boat salary as a foundation, Henry lived a pretty comfortable life. The sailor wasn't discouraged. He said, I've thought about that, but the path to music isn't limited to being a pianist. The piano is the king of instruments. As long as I understand music theory, there's actually a lot I can do. Isn't that right? Indeed. Henry did not deny it. In today's world music scene, British and American music is king, followed by the music of each country. The reason I can say this is because these two places have the largest markets and the most generous returns for musicians. There is no country where musicians don't hope to make it into the American Music Hall of Fame. The huge market means the job market is equally huge. Otherwise, how could so many people come up with music to meet the needs of everyone's ears? Henry turned and asked, speaking of piano, I just blindly read books and learned it on my own. You started learning when you were young. Do you have a recommended learning order, or which piano pieces you must practice? Can you tell me about it? Whether in the East or the West, there is no one who is not willing to be a teacher. Since Henry asked sincerely, the sailor naturally talked about his piano learning experience like a treasure. Although his family wasn't wealthy, he had found a piano teacher and taken a few lessons. With this foundation, coupled with his own diligent practice and the ease with which classical piano sheet music was available in those days, these were all advantages for a sailor to learn piano on his own. So when it comes to these things, he has a lot of knowledge. Henry can also occasionally hear some piano music that he has memorized from his lessons, and the two of them will demonstrate and discuss fingering on the spot. But Henry wasn't actually tapping his fingers on the battleship's railings pretending to play the piano. He was using sonar to explore the entire structure of the battleship Missouri. He hadn't intended to do this at first, but he had accidentally knocked on the battleship's wall while smoking in the lounge area. The sound waves that were transmitted back were collected by his super hearing, and his super brain constructed a 3D model in his mind. This was exactly the hull structure near his location. Henry, in a playful mood, tried to optimize his method and make the structural diagram in his mind more complete. Henry couldn't quite put his finger on the reason, but he simply wanted to get himself a set of battleship designs, just not on paper. After all, this thing is a military weapon, and the blueprints can't be found in the library. Even though the Iowa class was designed during World War II, in fact, when it comes to ship construction, all countries capable of building warships seem to know how to keep some tricks up their sleeves. For example, during World War II, the Japanese Yamato, which was known as the largest battleship in the world, its true hull data remains a secret. Of course, there is a set of explanations for the public release, but the voices claiming that the data is false have never stopped from the past to the present. The Iowa-class ship under Henry's feet now seems to have the same tradition of concealment. According to technical data available in the library, the battleship Missouri had a standard displacement of 45,000 tons and a full load displacement of 56,270 tons. It was 887 feet 3 inches long, 860 feet at the waterline, and 108 feet 2 inches wide at the waterline. The thickest armor was the gun armor, which was 19.7 inches. The sides were 12.1 inches, the deck was 7.5 inches, and the bulkheads were 11.3 inches. However, based on Henry's use of echo and his X-ray vision, he found that all the above data were wrong. This error wasn't due to any discrepancies between the Missouri's modernization and the original design. It was simply due to a problem with the numbers given in the first place. The only thing that's correct is probably the ship's width. To facilitate transit through the Panama Canal and cross the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, the U.S. Navy's ship designs inevitably take the canal's standards into consideration. In addition, as long as no one personally goes on board to measure the ship, the real data will only lie in the pile of drawings in the shipyard or in the military database. Henry knew this, not because he wanted to make such information public or profit from it, but simply because he wanted to find something to do to pass the time. To put it bluntly, just eat and have some free time. Chapter 66 Mysterious Boss. As the world's most powerful film factory, Hollywood may not be able to shoot movies as fast as the quick shooters in Hong Kong, but no matter what, it would not be so weird as to take several years to shoot a single movie. Not to mention that filming on a battleship could not be carried out indefinitely. As an active battleship, the Missouri has training missions and a regular maintenance schedule. Regardless of the military mission, it is not appropriate to conduct it while civilians are on board. However, a considerable amount of the entire film was filmed on the ship, except for some explosion or destruction scenes which were shot in the studio with sets. You can imagine how tight the filming schedule was. Not only are the main actors extremely busy, even passing actors like Henry may have to shoot for a whole day. Sometimes I would run through a certain passage, and when the next shot came, I would run back from the other side. Sometimes I would only capture my footsteps, and sometimes I would capture my entire body. If someone makes a mistake in their positioning and the assistant director responsible for shooting the interlude shot shouts NG, then they have to reset and run again, which takes even more time. This is still a shot of passers-by actors, and there is not much emphasis on the picture. If the lighting is not right when the main actors appear, the film will not look good, and the slightest flaw will be a reason to retake. All these things made Henry realize that compared with those small-scale, low-cost productions, the latter were really nothing. Fortunately, Lao Hei's chef team gave Henry, who had never been so busy in his life, enough spiritual comfort. With the Le Cordon Bleu chef around, Henry couldn't imagine how these Americans relaxed. They still went to the bars outside the naval port after get off work and got themselves drunk. If I had a headache, I'd take 2 ibuprofen. If that didn't stop, I'd increase the dosage by adding various leaves and rice, as if being clear-headed was an unforgivable sin. These Americans simply couldn't understand the idea of having a meal when you're in a bad mood, having a meal when there's something to celebrate, having a meal on holidays, having a meal when you wake up in the middle of the night, and having a meal when you have nothing to do. So during this period, the people who could talk to Blackie or Henry the most were each other. Henry also became an actor who enjoyed special treatment from Lao Hei, in addition to the other main actors. In Lao Hei's words, if he doesn't hone his cooking skills and explore new dishes, and just need dough to make donuts or bake pizza every day, he will sooner or later be wasted in this film production team. Then will you take this kind of stupid job next time that any kitchen helper can do, chef? Henry occupied the kitchen frying table and fried a piece of steak himself. At the same time, he asked a soul-searching question to Lao Hei, who was thinking about the ingredients on the side. Don't be fooled by the seemingly ordinary hamburger patty on the iron plate. It's the product of a recipe that Blackie and Henry have painstakingly developed over the course of several days. They mince several types of high-quality beef, blend them together, and then add special spices. The so-called exquisite food that is close to the common people is actually unaffordable for ordinary people and is only used to supply the rich. It is true that some wealthy people who think they are low-key and reserved just fall for this. Even if the cost of materials is enough to make a fine French meal, they are still happy to use a simple exterior to decorate a gorgeous interior. This is the complete opposite of the mentality of the nouveau riche who are eager to show off their wealth. After hearing Henry's question, Old Black had to take his eyes off the spices. After struggling for a while, he said, "Mad fake, I guess I'll take it." Henry was surprised. "Why? I thought you didn't like making this kind of mindless, mass-produced food. Using your cooking skills like a factory machine." "My mysterious boss really paid too much," Lao Hei said helplessly. He also added, "And how do you think those 3-star Michelin-certified chefs make their money? That star-rated restaurant? Stop it. How do you make money?" Henry asked curiously. Lao Hei sneered and said, "They just rely on selling recipes and recipe packs. The things you say can be mass-produced. Without these things to make money and supplement the income, how many people can keep a restaurant that loses money? You want both restaurant atmosphere and quality service. You don't think maintaining that damn thing is cheap? Those who chase Michelin stars are a bunch of crazy and stupid people." Henry had read such a statement in some food guides, but he didn't comment. However, what Old Black had just said made him curious and asked, "Mysterious boss? Weren't you hired by some producer?" "I was going to add something like son of a bitch before producer." Considering he was eating someone else's food, Henry held back a little. "My clientele doesn't include anyone you see here. Someone who could pull that ship here as a movie set might be a possibility," he said, pointing toward the battleship outside. "Can you guess which pickled radish should not be eaten?" Henry asked casually in a chatty manner. It's a shame, Lao He explained. My work is all arranged through a banquet company. They just tell me how much I'll be paid, where I'll go, and what I want to eat, that's all. They won't tell me who the boss is or who I'm going to meet. You know, if these things are known in advance and leaked out, there will be a lot of trouble. So I'd rather not know. You're not going to see anything but a bunch of people eating in those damn Venetian masks. How is that possible? There are some that kind of fun, but in most cases, I can meet the host of the dinner party. Even if I didn't know beforehand, how could I not say hello when I see him? I know a lot of wealthy people. So what's the situation here? Sighing, Lao He said, to be honest, being assigned to a film production team like today is really the first time in history. And it's a long-term job. At first, I almost thought it was a prank. After all, based on the standard of my meals, not to mention the cost of the ingredients, I wouldn't even be able to prepare enough to feed everyone. Even if those celebrities want to eat, they don't have the patience to spend 2 or 3 hours on a meal. Everyone's standards are the same, high-calorie, filling food. And it has to be quick, otherwise it will delay filming and the producer or director will go crazy. It was difficult for Henry to refute Blackie's evaluation because that was indeed the reality. Seeing that the steak was almost done, Henry put it on the iron wire mesh with a fork to drain the oil. Instead of preparing a plate for himself, he rummaged through the pile of high-quality materials labeled forbidden, completely ignoring whether old Black beside him felt sorry for him. Chapter 67 Junk Food. Henry found the ingredients, including cream lettuce, kale, and beef tomatoes, and heated up the high-quality Parmesan cheese on the side. Finally, he took out a piece of white bread the size of his open palm and cut it in half. Looking at this scene, Lao He looked constipated and said, "No, no, no, no. What are you going to do with these things? This can't be what I think it is." "Aha, you guessed what I was going to do. You are insulting these ingredients," Lao He said dissatisfiedly. But he did not make a move to stop them. Henry smiled and said, "Look, I have steak, 3-color vegetables, cheese, and bread. Anyone who sees this will think it's a nutritionally balanced meal." Lao He hesitated for a moment, then said with a slight smile, "Yes, that's right. Pile the prepared ingredients together neatly, sandwich the bread between the top and the bottom to make a burger." Henry held the burger and laughed. But why do people think it becomes junk food just because all these ingredients are piled up together? He wanted to make some excuse, but he couldn't find a way in. He could only dwell on it, looking sour. In fact, he was also wondering whether this was suitable as a dish. Rich people's food, besides being delicious, is sometimes just a gimmick. It's the state of "I have what others don't, and what they have is better than mine." Don't serve this dish too often, just as an alternative or a tasting dish. In fact, this super premium burger is impeccable in every way. Ignoring old Black who was still thinking hard, Henry found a white porcelain plate, put the extra-large hamburger he had just made on it, and found a place to sit in the dining area. He didn't take a knife and fork, because this thing should be held with hands to get the taste. But before he started eating, he felt like something was missing. Looking at the lonely hamburger, does it need some cola and French fries? Ah! I can do without the fries, but what can I do without the fat otaku happy water? It's like watching a movie without the sound, the fun is directly reduced by half. So Henry ran back to the bar and grabbed a can of Coca-Cola from the refrigerator. Although there were other options like Pepsi and Fanta, it was still best to choose the cola with the best sperm-killing effect. Seeing Lao He's disgusted look, Henry shrugged, shook the Coke can in his hand and said, "Without this, it feels like something is missing. It's like choosing red wine or white wine to go with French food. A suitable wine can make the taste of the meal even better." Lao He said with disgust, "How can Coke be compared to red wine? This is the biggest reason why hamburgers are considered junk food, no doubt about it. Carbonated drinks are not addictive, and their harm to the human body does not take effect quickly. But to say how good this thing is, you can drink it with all your meals, and if you are brave enough, feel free to give it a try. You will definitely be tortured by symptoms such as diabetes and gout and become unrecognizable." But Henry's Kryptonian physique wasn't afraid of these things. If he had any physical problems, he could fly high into the sky and bask in the sun, and all the pain and discomfort would disappear on the spot. This method has been proven to be effective and I haven't encountered any problems that it cannot solve yet. But before he could walk back to his seat, Henry saw that the large hamburger he had carefully prepared was now in the hands of someone else, and half of it had disappeared. Judging from the satisfied look on the man's face as he chewed, there was no need to doubt which dog had eaten the burger. Henry immediately cursed out in the American style, "Madfuck! Where did you come from? You see food and just shove it in your mouth. Aren't you afraid that I'll put some man glue on it and watch you happily eat it? Fuck!" The man eating the hamburger cursed and immediately moved away from the food in his hand. But he reluctantly moved forward, sniffed it carefully, and said, "Although I haven't tasted that thing, I've at least smelled it. I'm sure there's a scent of rosemary in the burger, but not gardenia. So I assume you're saying that just to disgust people." After that, the man held the hamburger in both hands as if to demonstrate, looked at Henry with both eyes, took a big bite viciously, and then made a lewd expression of enjoyment, just to irritate the person in front of him. Henry, as he had hoped, exploded on the spot. He jumped up and down and said, "Fuck! Fuck! That's my lunch. Well, it tastes really good." Sucking the gravy from his fingers, the arrogant young man made an expression as if he deserved a beating. Henry's Kryptonian iron fist is itching for a rare moment. They say killing one's parents is an unforgivable sin. Stealing someone's food is even worse. All along, in line with the principle of being a humble person, Henry has been hiding his emotions well to avoid losing control and exposing his abilities. He had never expected to encounter a young man today who could break his defenses. He felt like eating him up, not just beating him up. However, Henry still exerted his utmost restraint. He squinted his eyes, looked at the young man in front of him, and said, "You are not from the production team, are you? I haven't seen you here before." Henry remembered seeing this young man before. A Caltech student? The one who was with the idiot who asked that stupid question? So this is the quality of a student from a world-renowned university. Henry's question did not bring back the same memory for the young man. He just ate his burger nonchalantly, sometimes stuffing the stringy hot cheese into his mouth, sometimes putting it back on the burger. It's inappropriate to chase celebrities and come to the set. Even if you're a student from a top university, I can call security and have you removed in a minute. If you don't want to get kicked in the ass, I advise you to cooperate. You do not know who I am." The young man blurted out this sentence in a very foolish way, which was no less than lighting the fuse on Henry's firecracker. Henry yelled, "Nonsense! Eat my big dick! Do you think you look like the Green Franklin? Everyone in the world wants to know you." The young man, who had never been humiliated like this before, was stunned. Even the burger in his mouth lost its flavor. He stared at the person in front of him in amazement, and then his mouth began to spit out sweet words. "I may not look like that bald Franklin, but I have enough Franklins, weighing several tons. Enough to crush you into a meat patty. Do you know how powerful I am? Ha, that's just the amount of attack power." Henry sneered and said, "What if you have more Franklins? Will you share them with me?" The young man shook his head as a matter of course. "I think so. Since you won't give it to me, then it has nothing to do with me. So why should I indulge you, a jerk? I don't get a dime from flattering you. I've had too much fake wine and I think of you as my sugar daddy." Chapter 68 Master Stark. Although I wanted to continue cursing, I could already hear the assistant director calling on passers-by actors through my super hearing. Henry hurriedly grabbed a few donuts and stuffed them into his mouth. He then gulped down his Coke and, feeling resentful, continued his work for the day. The young man was stunned by the scolding. He had never felt so wronged in his life. But he was not discouraged or helpless. Instead, he was thinking about the words to fight back. But before I could even finish my words, my opponent ran away. This is no different from the unruly poker players who run away after winning money. He wanted to get up and chase after him. But he couldn't bear to leave the half-eaten cheeseburger in his hand. "Hey, don't run!" Only then did he notice that there was a big black man in a chef's uniform next to him. Of course, Lao He is not an inexperienced person like Henry. He knows who this young man is who is eating a hamburger and can't let it go. He was just stunned by the scene just now. He didn't expect that his new friend would actually clash with this person. It wasn't until Henry hurried away and most of the people in the dining area had left that he came to his senses and stepped forward to greet him, "Master Stark." Tony Stark didn't reply. He just looked at the big black man who recognized him with some impatience. Lao He introduced himself, "Master, I am Wesley Washington. I am the head chef of the chef team you hired. Oh, it's you. I remember you. Tony Stark raised the half-eaten food in his hand and said, the burger is good. At least it proves that hiring you was the right decision. Old Black Wesley wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, well, Master, I have to be honest with you. This is a new recipe that I developed with the person just now. I am honored to add it to my cooking, and you can enjoy it again in the future. But for what just happened, could you please be magnanimous and forgive him this time? I'll explain your identity to him and teach him to respect you so he won't offend me again. Old Black pleaded for Henry. At this point, if he still doesn't know who the biggest name in the film production team is, it would be a waste of his time to meet these rich people in heaven. Stark, a surname that has been a constant companion to Americans since World War II. Stark Industries products range from civilian projects to military projects. While the variety of products produced is limited, whenever they are produced, they are always top-notch in their field. Howard Stark had a very good relationship with the U.S. military. As an unofficial scientist, he frequently appeared in military research projects, sometimes leading them and sometimes serving as an advisor. With such a background, it would not be difficult to pull out the battleship Missouri in service. If they need it, they can even pull out the aircraft carrier formation. Wesley certainly didn't want his new friend to offend this person, so he pleaded for mercy. In this sense, he was a very loyal person. He didn't just think about running faster than his companions when faced with danger. Tony Stark didn't answer directly, but asked, he just finished scolding people and left. What's going on? They should be getting ready for filming. The actors who acted with him are almost all gone. Is he an actor too? The main character? The supporting character? Tony Stark only remembered who the film's heroine was and that the battleship Missouri was needed. He didn't care about anything else, so he asked now. Young Master Stark. Don't call me Master, and don't call me Mr. Stark, it will remind me of another Stark. You can call me Tony. The young man, who is still in his rebellious period, emphasized. Okay, Tony. He's just a passing actor, neither the protagonist nor the supporting role. It's really not worth your effort. Blackie was interrupted again. Tony Stark said while eating his burger, this tastes really good. I asked him to be my personal chef. Would he agree? Wesley was stunned for a moment, then said, I believe it would be an honor for Henry. But I don't think he would agree. How do you know? Because I also tried to recruit him to be my assistant, and even help him start his own business. But Henry didn't agree. Rejected? The salary you offered is too low. The first instinct of children from wealthy families is that the money is not enough. Lao He said in panic, no, 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 I'll give him a fixed salary of NT $150,000 a year. If he works with me on catering assignments, he'll get a bonus each time. This is much higher than what he would make as a street actor. Tony Stark certainly wouldn't understand that an annual salary of $150,000 is more than 3 times the average salary in the United States. He just recalled another thing, which was related to a few keywords that the man said. Caltech, stupid questions, stupid people. Especially the last one, he only thought of Justin Hammer. This certainly doesn't mean that this is the only idiot at Caltech. Rather, this is the only idiot worthy of being remembered by Tony Stark. So many clues were enough for Tony Stark to recall that in the rest area outside the library, Justin Hammer used a question about the space shuttle returning to Earth to lure out a passerby who could figure out the answer at a glance. Possessing extraordinary computing abilities was nothing to Tony Stark, especially those students from the East Country, each of whom was like a human calculator. But this person also has excellent cooking skills, which means that even a genius hasn't given up on the taste for life. This is great, much better than those geniuses who are only partial to one subject and can't take care of themselves. And this guy's job is to be a passerby actor in Hollywood. Isn't this crazy? Any one of the above 3 qualities, if present in a person alone, would not be worthy of Tony Stark's attention. But if the 3 of them were to get together, it had to be said that Tony, with his vast knowledge, would also be interested in such a patient. He wanted to dissect the other person's brain to see where the knot or missing nerve was. With better jobs available, why did that guy insist on being an actor? Did he really want to be a big star that much? Tony Stark asked. At the same time, I was thinking, if the other person wants to become a star, what should I do to make him surrender? But Blackie knew what Henry was thinking. He said, I asked him, and he doesn't really want to be famous. He just came to Hollywood to see the world because he likes Audrey Hepburn. Maybe he'll get tired of it and look for other work. Oh, when did I get tired of seeing this? Tony Stark repeated the sentence playfully. Chapter 69 Expulsion. I'm sorry to tell you this, Henry. This is the first sentence a Kryptonian who travels to this world hears when he comes face to face with a big star. Steven Seagal stood in front of Henry with a serious face and said, "We already know about the conflict in the dining area yesterday. Regardless of the facts, you did say something rude. Although Mr. Stark did not make such a request, other producers believe that keeping you in the team would be detrimental to the filming of the movie. After all, being able to borrow the battleship Missouri as a filming location wouldn't have been possible without Mr. Stark's assistance. Any further conflict wouldn't be good for anyone. You can agree on that, right? Mr. Stark?" Mad fug. Henry, who was confused, figured out the whole story in an instant. In this world, in the United States, there are only two Starks who are so highly regarded. One is Howard Stark, a genius scientist and entrepreneur who has been active since World War II, the other is of course Tony Stark, the future owner of Stark Industries. In other words, judging by age, the jerk who stole his burger yesterday was Tony Stark. Then he scolded him, and it really was, not unfair. With that kind of character, I didn't even treat him to Krypton Iron Fist. It turns out that he is protected by the protagonist's luck. Henry thought it through and said seriously, "I understand, Mr. Sieg. So what should we do now?" Steven Seagal produced a check and said, "Your employment ends today. This is your previous paycheck. If you have any questions about the numbers, you can go to the finance department." Henry accepted the check without hesitation. His position within the production team was that of a disposable actor. Insisting on staying and using the contract as an excuse would only make things awkward for everyone involved. Seeing the man before him so sensible, Steven Seagal felt relieved. He shook Henry's hand and said, "I'm sorry we have to handle this way. Actually, I was very optimistic about you. The fight scenes you and I performed better than anyone else. I was thinking of signing you to my exclusive team, but it's a pity that something like this happened today. I hope we'll have the opportunity to work together again." Henry said, "Thank you, Mr. Sieg." Whether it was a courtesy or a genuine expression, celebrities are simply busier than everyone else. Steven Seagal left after he finished speaking. As for Henry, someone would naturally watch him leave and ensure he didn't cause any trouble. After changing out of his villain costume in the dressing room, Henry prepared to leave. As he passed the dining area, he saw Chef Black directing the team to clean up the mess left after breakfast. Henry decided to say hello before leaving. Henry first said to the two security guards following him, "Hey, guys. I'm going to talk to the chef for a few minutes, then go back to the restaurant to pack up and leave. Is that okay?" These two strong men also smoked with Henry. They looked at each other and said, "Brother, don't stay too long. The heroine doesn't have any scenes this morning, so you and that girl probably won't run into each other again during this period. You have to promise not to cause trouble, so that we can be reasonable with the producers." "I promise not to cause trouble," Henry swore to himself. As for the hints from the two security guards, they were obvious enough. Whether the heroine had no scenes that morning or was a last-minute arrangement, it was definitely related to that young man. But that was not something Henry could worry about. Henry went over and exchanged fist bumps with the black chef. The black man, whose racial talent was a natural rap rhythm, said enthusiastically, "Why didn't I see you for breakfast this morning?" "Brother. I went to meet the big star, Mr. Steven Seagal." Henry said honestly. Logically, this should be a good thing, but Lao He sensed something was wrong from Henry's face, which was not very smiling. He asked, "Brother, what's wrong?" Taking out the check from his pocket and shaking it, Henry said, "My work ends today. You don't have to come tomorrow." "How could they do this?" "Why not? The termination clause in the contract is for use when necessary," Henry said with a cheerful attitude. He patted the check in his breast pocket again and said, "Besides, they followed the rules and didn't deduct a cent. Even if I wanted to make trouble, I wouldn't have any reason to." Henry remembered the contract details perfectly. His daily salary, plus the compensation for the crew's voluntary termination, was exactly the same as the amount on the check, with no flaws to be found. I wanted to discuss why, but Lao He suddenly widened his eyes and said, could it be because of what happened yesterday? Yes, it was me who offended the young master of the Stark family. You know who that person is? I just found out. Henry said innocently. But I pleaded for you yesterday, and Mr. Stark agreed not to pursue the matter. Is there any misunderstanding here? Lao He said aggrievedly. First, he was surprised at Blackie's righteousness, and then Henry was angry at Tony Stark's backtracking. But after a little thought, he knew that this might not be the case. Henry said, it's probably not that young master who took the initiative to pursue the matter. Otherwise, he would have come out in person and humiliated me to vent his anger. But when I met with Mr. Sieg, he was just doing his job and was quite polite on the surface. What's going on? I guess the producers didn't want me to clash with that young master again, so they asked me to leave. If it was the young master from the Stark family who borrowed the boat, then he is indeed very important. In comparison, I am insignificant. Chef Wesley certainly understood that what Henry said was absolutely correct. Those who are powerful don't need to tell others what to do in order for things to go ahead. Instead, people around them will naturally understand their boss's intentions and then take initiative. Then they just need to choose an appropriate time to tell the story of their deeds. Even if they may not receive gratitude from these powerful people, as long as their deeds are remembered, it is a big step forward. Although Lao He knew many wealthy people through catering, he was just an acquaintance. He understood these people's thoughts better than ordinary people, but he couldn't change anything. Henry, on the other hand, was thinking about something else. The person from yesterday was the first superhero he had encountered since coming to this world, a human before he became a superhero. But the other person looked nothing like the actor he remembered. Henry casually asked, Chef, do you know Robert Downey Jr.? Chapter 70 The Difference Between Reality and Memory. Are you talking about the little star in Chaplin and his lovers? I heard that kid has a celebrity dad. He must be very famous in your circle. Why are you asking about me? You know him? Henry exclaimed in surprise. Well, I went to see it because I wanted to know who Hollywood is looking for to portray the female stars of the Golden Age. To be honest, it was quite disappointing. But Chaplin boy has good acting skills, I can still see that. So what do you think? Robert Downey Jr. looks like Tony Stark. Lao He suddenly widened his copper bell-like eyes, lowered his voice, and asked closer, What? Do you have a rumor that those two are half-blood brothers or something? No, I don't have any such information. I just want to ask. Do you think these two people have any similarities in appearance or temperament? After a long pause, Old Black said, No, I don't think they look alike in any way. Especially when you put the two of them together, the young man from a celebrity family wouldn't be able to be proud in front of the heir to Stark Industries. Blackie's answer gave Henry a warning. It seemed he couldn't use facial recognition to determine if someone was the real superhero. Because actors are actors and superheroes are superheroes, they are independent individuals. Considering the tradition of American comics based on their own stories, perhaps what I know is unreliable. Who knows what is really going on Earth in this universe? For example, is the one-eyed director of SHIELD black or white? Is Tony Stark Howard Stark's biological son? Will he become Iron Man or the Sorcerer Supreme? After Captain America is rescued from the North Pole, will he wake up and yell Hail _ Hydra? There's no need to even ask if this is the most famous Marvel Cinematic Universe. After all, mutants running around everywhere is not something you'd expect from a movie universe. Also, besides the fucking Marvel system, are there any weird things here? Especially the last question, Henry can guarantee that there is definitely one. Because he is the weirdest person in the universe, a suspected Kryptonian who doesn't even know if he exists in the Marvel universe. The biggest sequelae of this incident is that when those people from the intelligence organization appear around him, Henry cannot recognize them by face unless they reveal a flaw. Like an agent of SHIELD with a shiny forehead, or the bald South American agent of SHIELD who has high authority but is ordered around like a lackey. Henry was overwhelmed by the thought. He once again reaffirmed his principle of staying safe and not recklessly. Don't meet an African American actor in Hollywood who keeps saying mad fake. Don't have a stress reaction and think that the other person is a shill from SHIELD. That would be funny. Perhaps it was Henry's silence while he pondered that made Black feel a little uneasy, even though it was only for a short time. Chef Wesley said, Kid, do you want me to intercede with Tony Stark for you? Henry was surprised at first, then smiled and shook his head, saying, "Thanks, chef. But I don't think so. This is just a job, and there's no crew that can shoot forever. If it ends early, I'll just find another one early. It's no big deal. Besides, you already said that Tony Stark promised not to pursue the matter. I also believe that he has no interest in pursuing a small-time figure like me. The ones who fired me were others who wanted to curry favor with him, so it would be inappropriate to ask him to intercede for me." Besides, Henry didn't think that Lao He had enough influence to make those rich people willing to listen to his request. Don't let things go wrong, old Black lose face, and can't vent his anger on those people, but instead blame Henry for being careless. Then we won't even be friends anymore. After finishing their conversation, Henry stood up and prepared to leave. At this time, old Black smiled and said, "Brother, what about the recipe for that hamburger?" Henry said generously, "Use it if you want. You can also publish it under your name if you want. After all, you did participate in the research and development. And you provided all the ingredients. I ate so many meals of yours for free, it's more than enough. Hey, brother, thanks. You have my phone number. If you don't want to be an actor anymore and want to find a job, just come to me. The treatment I promise to give you will only get better, not worse." "Thanks." Henry shook hands with old Black, who was almost twice his size, put his shoulders together, patted each other on the back, and left. That's the fun part about working in Hollywood, there are always new friends and goodbyes. The breath of summer has quietly arrived in California. Driving his second-hand Cadillac, Henry has to roll down the windows to let in the cool breeze to feel just the right amount of comfort. Just keep walking north. Although he was fired by the crew midway, Henry stayed in San Diego for nearly a month. San Diego is not far from Los Angeles, and it takes about 2 hours to drive there. Henry was not in a hurry at all and just drove leisurely on the road. Being unexpectedly fired didn't bring Henry much regret. The next time he encountered someone trying to steal his food, no matter if it was Stark or Doom, Henry would beat them up without hesitation. Taking stock of what I gained from the crew, apart from Steven Seagal's praise, which was probably just a polite compliment, the invitations from several other action teams were real. Of course, they didn't extend the olive branch on the last day, but before that, someone had contacted Henry and tried to recruit him. These action teams all seemed more reliable than Channing's. However, Henry declined and didn't agree to join anyone's team. Perhaps after today, the bosses of these teams will be thankful that the man didn't agree in the first place. Otherwise, if Master Stark took his anger out on them, what would they do with their small bodies? Henry, presumptuously speculating on other people's thoughts, played out various small dramas in his mind. He whistled while driving towards Los Angeles. Back in Hollywood, I happened to go to Aunt Caesaria's Italian restaurant for a meal. Henry loves coming here because he doesn't know if the Italian food here is authentic, but it's really delicious. And every time he comes, he can practice his Italian in different ways. For example, he practiced Italian men's techniques for picking up girls with Aunt Caesaria's husband and then used them on Aunt Caesaria. This magical thing that sounds like magic actually happened in the restaurant. The Italian couple didn't take it seriously, but rather found it amusing. At least when Henry praised Aunt Salia's beauty or cooking skills, the uncle always looked proud. All I can say is that Henry still needs to learn about the Italians' romance. Chapter 71 A Different Job Invitation. I went to the Actors Guild again, planning to tease Marion with my newly learned tricks, and also to see if there was any new recruitment information. But the clerk who always sat behind the counter disappeared today and was replaced by a middle-aged man wearing square-framed glasses. Henry, who didn't want to tease the uncle, had to stop and nodded silently as a greeting. I couldn't tell whether I was disappointed or expected. There were no new suitable jobs listed on the notice board, and no news of auditions from the union. Anyway, it was another day of coming home empty-handed. The reason why I joined the production team of Devil Warrior was to add a good record to my qualifications. But getting fired midway, that didn't seem like a good look. Should I include this experience in my acting profile? Henry wondered. Henry bought ingredients for dinner and returned to his rented house early without planning to go to the library. It wasn't like the house was completely uninhabited during this nearly month. Henry would still come back when the film crew was on vacation, so there wasn't a month's worth of dust in the house. Using his super speed, Henry quickly cleaned the house. He then put all the newly bought items that needed to be refrigerated or frozen into the refrigerator and grabbed a can of beer. Henry wouldn't get drunk, he just wanted a cool drink. Damn the warm water theory. Fat House Happy Water is also an option, but it can't compete with some country brands of beer, which are even more expensive than Coke and bottled water. It's America after all. Henry's analysis revealed no advanced technology involved in the beer. The only reason it was so cheap and not a national hit was because it was bitter. In short, Henry could only choose between the cloyingly sweet happy water and the bitterly cold beer, or drink the water from the tap. It wasn't that the tap water wasn't good enough that Henry didn't drink it often. It was that the pipes in this apartment were old, and the water always had a rusty smell. For a Kryptonian with a super sense of taste, this was a bit torturous. Maybe I should buy a water purifier, or make one myself, Henry thought. Just when I was about to find a record to play, immerse my body, mind, and soul in the music, and live a life of leisure, I didn't expect the phone to ring first. Hey, hey. A voice came from the phone. Hey, Henry, man, I heard you got into big trouble. Channing? Mad fake, did the news spread so quickly? I just got back from San Diego this morning. This is Hollywood. Those tabloid reporters don't have as much information as people in the circle. The head of the action team he had worked with said proudly on the phone. What? Is there a rumor going around in the circle that they're teaming up to ban me? There's a saying like that, after all, the mess you've caused this time is really huge. But the real owner hasn't made any such request, which has left everyone at a loss as to how to proceed. Oh, why didn't you think that you might have killed the wrong person? You didn't let him go. You just ripped me off in one go, clean and neat. You don't know this. People in Hollywood have always been unsure of what the Stark family is thinking. I've done many things where I thought I got a hint, but ended up being ridiculed by the Stark family. Someone from the Stark family. This was what Henry was curious about. Tony Stark was still in college. Henry didn't realize he was actually pursuing a PhD, and unless he'd been stalking Hollywood women before he'd even grown all his hair, there wouldn't have been much of a legend left behind. The person who can make Hollywood people tremble is Howard Stark. According to the information he had before traveling through time, the prototype of Howard Stark was a real American tycoon, Howard Hughes. He was a famous business tycoon, pilot, aeronautical engineer, philanthropist, and film producer. He also ran RKO, one of the 8 major film studios in the 30s. He was a Hollywood man with a long and rich history. In other words, the Howard Stark in this world actually has similar experiences to Howard Hughes. As if to confirm Henry's guess, Channing said on the phone. You wouldn't think Stark Industries has nothing to do with Hollywood, would you? The best photography equipment is still produced by Stark Industries. The latest technology also originated from Stark Industries. The previous generation's Master Stark not only served as a producer and photographer, but he even starred in his own films. This is not to mention how many beauties from the Golden Age became part of his scandal list. Old Stark is good at playing, and young Stark follows suit. This father and son are biological children, there is no doubt about it. Okay. The Starks are all freaks, Henry concluded. He added, so, Channing, you called me today, didn't you? You didn't mean to laugh at me. Now that the story has spread like wildfire, the truth doesn't matter anymore. Hey, brother, of course not. It's actually very simple to resolve your issue. Just go apologize to Tony Stark, bow your head, and he won't say anything else, and the matter will be over. You wouldn't even do that, would you? Should I agree to it? Henry wondered. In order to show the Kryptonian's backbone, Tony Stark wants to see his forehead after he bows his head, and the only way is to ask the other party to be hit by the head. But this is not the way to do things in the real world. Based on my experience as a cow and horse for more than 10 years before crossing over, I will definitely not die if I lower my head. It has nothing to do with whether I am a Kryptonian in this life. Henry was concerned that Iron Man might not be a popular character in the original comics, but in the early days of the film world, he was a well-deserved protagonist. Would approaching such a person go against the principle of my own obscene development? But before considering these things, Henry first asked curiously, Channing, are you saying that you can arrange a meeting between me and Tony Stark? Otherwise, how can I apologize to him? Brother, stop joking. How could I possibly arrange something like this? You think too highly of me. I just happen to have an opportunity. What chance? Qian Ning said seriously, my team members occasionally act as receptionists or bodyguards at banquets. I just happened to get another job, which mainly involves wealthy students from Caltech and their Silicon Valley alumni. And then there will be some celebrity guests and models. There's a good chance Tony Stark will be in attendance. Why don't you join as a receptionist and seize this opportunity? Such an opportunity. Henry dragged out the word, obviously reluctant. Okay, I'll be honest. I'm a little short on manpower, so consider it a favor. The work isn't tiring, there are beauties to look at, and you can even sneak in some drinks. Chapter 72 Rich Man's Party. In the end, Henry agreed to Channing's request and became a member of the banquet staff. The idea is actually very simple, that is, no matter how hard I try, I may not be able to attend a banquet of this level, so it is better to be a staff member and see the world. Secondly, he wanted to repay Qianning for a favor. Although he could be considered to have helped the production team with the special effects scene, it was Qianning's recommendation that gave him the opportunity. This time he was in trouble again, and the call from Channing, the old Hollywood man, was to give Henry some pointers and an opportunity to resolve the problem, regardless of whether he needed it or not. If this kind of forced favor was truly unnecessary, he would have just declined it. But in this situation, it was optional, so Henry simply chose to accept it. So at this moment, he was wearing a rented black suit, standing at the corner next to the swimming pool of a manor villa, playing the role of an emotionless bodyguard. The reason why he is not a receptionist is because the male receptionist's uniform is a white sleeveless shirt with a black bow tie, and then suspenders and hip-length shorts, with half-length socks and black leather shoes at the bottom. The overall look is very eye-catching, and even Kryptonians can't stand it. Even though the receptionist's salary was higher, Henry still let it go. This wasn't a question of money, it was a question of awareness. Unfortunately, Henry didn't have it. No one knows who owns the villa. It was rented by a banquet company specifically for hosting parties. Food and drinks are not a problem. The reception staff's task is actually to carry plates, walk around the party venue, collect empty glasses, and serve drinks and food. Balloons, streamers, firecrackers, and other party items can be found everywhere, and anyone who wants to use them can take them and play with them. The DJ mix and speakers were placed in the main area, next to the swimming pool. The music played was the embryonic form of electronic dance music, which stimulated the nerves like a mental anesthetic. The most surprising thing is that there is a smoking area inside the room. People who smoke ordinary cigarettes are not allowed to enter. Those who enter this area, even if they don't use special cigarettes, will be anesthetized by the smell in the air and enter a trance-like state. There were quite a few people at the party. To tell which ones were invited guests, the banquet company staff, or even the playmates providing special services, one had to look at their attire. They wear strange costumes, such as bunny girl costumes, cowboy costumes, etc., and are almost all receptionists or playmates. Like Henry, he was dressed in a black suit and looked very respectable. He was just a bodyguard hired for decoration. While the invited guests were all wealthy, they were either college students or Silicon Valley upstarts. Consequently, their attire was quite casual, mostly t-shirts and sweatpants, a casual look. But don't think that just because they were dressed casually, they were wearing cheap clothes. Based on Henry's recent understanding of fashion, each of them was wearing clothes worth thousands of taels. There was a bikini beauty lying on each of the two floating mats in the swimming pool. They were also part of the playmates. Sometimes there would be some crazy guys who would jump into the swimming pool without even taking off their clothes, making a huge splash and making the two beauties giggle. If a bikini beauty is invited upstairs by a guest for a deeper conversation, someone else will step in. The goal is to ensure the scenery is pleasing to the eye and there's a wide variety of playthings to choose from. For Henry, the experience was truly astonishing. This banquet was like a human flesh market, only missing the weight and pound system. He had never seen such extravagant scenes in his previous life. What's more fucking important is that this isn't even a truly top-notch human flesh feast. It was just a scene organized by an ordinary Hollywood banquet company that needed support from Channing's team. Even an outsider like Henry, who knows no details, can easily become a member, which shows that there is almost no requirement for confidentiality. The level of this kind of banquet that does not require confidentiality can never be too high. Henry had no intention of speaking on behalf of the parents of those girls or boys and feeling sorry for the children they had worked so hard to raise, even if they were indeed treated rudely or impolitely. If you really want to act noble, you should just turn around and leave this place instead of standing by and criticizing. So Henry simply put on sunglasses, pretended to be indifferent, and watched everything coldly. The main function of these party bodyguards is not to protect anyone, but to help people calm down when they are too excited. It's not that they are worried that these people will hurt the girls or boys, but they are worried that they will turn their anger against the group of guests who were also invited. Then, when someone is too drunk to take care of themselves, find an empty bed or sofa and throw them on it to rest, instead of letting them sleep on their stomachs and suffocate themselves or drown in their own vomit. After all, this place is mostly populated by young people, who are more likely to overdo things and get themselves killed or cause someone else's death. The bodyguard's job is to make sure that anyone seeking death doesn't die at this party, so that others don't get into trouble. In short, at this time, Henry was a little disgusted with the fact that his super senses were too powerful, and the entire villa was under the coverage of his perception. Especially when he tried to use the echo of knocking on the hull to map the structure of a battleship a while ago, Henry's brain learned the ability to use sound to construct spatial images. Probably the only physical information left was color, which had to be received directly by the optic nerve and could not be observed indirectly with existing abilities. Henry knew everything else clearly. Henry wished he had a switch to turn off his superpowers, but unfortunately, Henry could only divert his attention to ignore those unpleasant things. But now, being a bodyguard meant, frankly, standing still and daydreaming. Henry hadn't trained his brain to the point where he could stand still and let his mind wander. So, he was tormented by everything that happened in the villa. If he hadn't been able to come here because of Channing's face, he would have wanted to wait for Tony Stark to show his attitude and solve his own troubles, otherwise Henry would have left long ago. So the question is, will the eldest son of the Stark family really come to this party? Don't let Channing emphasize Tony Stark's name on the invitation list. Being invited and actually showing up are two different things. Henry had heard plenty of stories about a party where a bunch of high-profile people were invited, only to find a bunch of idiots showed up. Just as he was thinking about whether to stare at the girls' lips and study their lipstick colors to divert his attention, an unexpected guest came in front of Henry and snapped his fingers. 20220821220609814 2022082223297201707211425462202072113254131489560867304622008 co-I_. Chapter 73 Enemies Meet on a Narrow Road. Hey, man, I know you. The man who snapped his fingers said to Henry. Not satisfied with just talking, he reached out and took off Henry's sunglasses to confirm the appearance of this bodyguard. Being treated so rudely, Henry couldn't help but see who the visitor was. Although he didn't know the name, Henry recognized that the other person was the college student who had asked him questions in the same rude way in the lounge area of the Caltech library. Well, maybe they're masters or doctoral students. Who knows, they don't wear name tags. Looking back at the situation at that time, anyone who could face Tony Stark head-on must have been of high status. They were just strangers at the time, so Henry readily punched him in the face. But this time, their enemies met again. As an employee at the banquet, he certainly couldn't do anything rude to the invited guests. Henry still had some professional ethics. So he could only play dumb and say, "What can I do for you, sir?" Justin Hammer, surrounded by women on both sides, continued snapping his fingers in front of others with his free hand and said, "Hey, man, don't pretend you don't know me, I remember you, and I remember you very clearly. You're not that amazing. Anyone with a brain can solve any problem with just a glance. So why are you standing here today? Oh, I see. You're short of money, right? There could be other reasons. Fuck, this guy, who I don't know who he is he proud of holding a grudge? Otherwise, why would he emphasize it so much? He still remembers it so clearly." Henry's inner monologue was well suppressed and he didn't say it out loud. He just tried to divert his gaze from the rich young man in front of him, so as not to make his fists itch. Justin Hammer, completely unaware of how dangerous his situation was, continued to provoke the Kryptonians who were trying their best to swallow their anger. A chubby guy wearing a sports jacket and a baseball cap tilted to one side noticed what was happening. He immediately left the girl beside him and walked over. He said, "Hey, Justin, what's going on here?" "No, I just saw a guy I know." "You know what a genius this guy is. He can answer any question just by looking at it." "Oh, really?" The fat man turned to Henry and said, "Hey, brother, why are you doing this kind of work here? Come to my company, I'll give you an annual salary of 100,000 yuan. If you perform well, I can even give you a raise. Justin pushed the fat guy in dissatisfaction and said, "Hey, what the hell? You know what this guy did? He humiliated me. Now you want to give him a job? Well, I think a job that only pays 100,000 is humiliating, no doubt." Fuck. Are you serious? Yes, are you serious? Henry's inner thoughts were the same as those of this man named Justin, although the two of them might not have the same point of complaint. But this little fat guy was also someone who could accomplish great things. He understood the importance of people. Or rather, from the very beginning, he had been on the side of the man named Justin. He pulled out a modern-day mobile phone from his jacket, a Nokia Sideman 190, produced in the 90s. In this era where bulky and heavy portable phones are the norm, the design of this Nokia phone is quite in line with the fashion sense of urban people. But the fat man didn't show any mercy and just threw the phone back. With a splash, the phone fell into the swimming pool. The fat man looked extremely surprised and said, "Oh no! Something fell into the water. Could you please help me retrieve it, sir? It's an electronic product and will be damaged if it gets soaked in water. If you hurry up and get it back, maybe it can be saved." Although I really want to punch this fat guy in the face and turn his fat face into a sunken bun face. But Henry discovered one thing to his regret, that is, according to the instructions before work, helping guests retrieve things that accidentally fell into the swimming pool was indeed within his job scope. Although the manager added that guests are generally not that careless. In addition, most of these situations are just playful interactions between guests, who will pick up the things that fall into the water themselves. The bodyguards have to be careful not to let guests drown in the water. If someone really can't get it back, they still have to help instead of just sitting back and doing nothing. This is just in case. Henry wanted to ask, what should I do now that this job responsibility is being abused? Waiting online, urgent. Without taking any immediate action, Henry just maintained his initial expressionless look and looked at the fat man who was suspected to be the host of the banquet. The fat guy, who looked like a street black, pretended to be cruel and said, "What are you looking at? Pick it up. If it's really broken, I'll make you pay for it. Or do you want me to say the magic word? Please. Is this okay? This suit is rented. If it gets soaked, not only will I have to pay for expensive cleaning, but I'll also have to buy it." Going into a swimming pool is a big decision. But Henry chose to jump in anyway. Without a word of protest, he walked around the person blocking his way and stood at the edge of the pool. Then, with a straight step, he plummeted into the water. The pool isn't very deep. If an adult stands up, the water is almost up to their waist. Swimming is fine in this kind of pool, but diving is not recommended. So Henry didn't think of doing anything too fancy, but just walked over to where the phone had gone into the water. Then he bent down, entered the water, and fished out the expensive Nokia from the bottom of the pool. Of course, my entire suit was soaked. Even my head was a mess. This was so I could confirm where my phone was at the bottom of the pool without having to hold my breath and dive in for ages. The fat man laughed heartily by the pool and said, "Right, wouldn't it have been better if we had done this earlier?" Seeing the satisfied look on the face of the person he was trying to flatter, the little fat man said, "Justin, if you still want to punish him, take my advice and send him directly to the island." "What island?" Justin was puzzled at first, then said, "Could it be the rumored orgy island? That big guy wouldn't be suitable." "Hey, there's more to the island than just fun activities. But you know, I can't reveal too many details outside." Both of them thought they had lowered their voices so that people in the pool wouldn't hear them. Little did they know that Henry had already focused on them and heard every word clearly. So when Henry picked up the phone and stood up from the swimming pool, he did not immediately climb the escalator beside the swimming pool. Instead, he shook the phone at the fat boy and threw it over the fence. "Oh, sorry, my hand slipped." Henry frowned, pouted, and spread his hands, making a helpless expression as if he deserved a beating. Chapter 74 Latecomers. Henry didn't care about the fat boy jumping up and down by the pool. He left the pool from the iron escalator on the other side. Then he took off his soaked suit jacket, slinging it over his shoulder with one hand, loosened his tie with the other, and walked gracefully towards the villa's gate. The fat boy ran over and stopped the man, saying, "Mad fake, go pick up my mobile phone, or I will fire you." "Oh, sir, don't bother. I'm quitting now," so you can save yourself the trouble of firing me and get a new cell phone. To be honest, based on what Henry knows about the market for electronic products, it's a good deal to exchange this suit for a mobile phone. So Henry didn't want to stay and argue, and he pulled the fat boy away. This was the result of holding back, otherwise if he pushed too hard, the fat boy would probably stick to the wall and turn into a meat patty. What's interesting is that the receptionists or bodyguards arranged by the banquet company acted as if they didn't see anything happening here. This was actually the banquet company's instructions. If a conflict occurs, avoid hurting anyone and simply leave. Everything will be handled easily later. But if someone is assaulted, the situation becomes completely different. If the bodyguards don't intervene, they're derelict in their duty. From this, it seems the banquet company is well aware of the character of these wealthy individuals. Therefore, they must have a standard procedure in place. Otherwise, wouldn't they be annoyed by the constant drama of the boss versus the special forces bodyguard? But when Henry walked to the front yard of the villa, the door opened and a flashy red Ferrari sports car came in, blocking Henry's way. The man who got out of the sports car was none other than Tony Stark, one of Henry's targets. He casually tossed a bunch of keys over and said, "Park my car." "Oh, it's you." Henry, having been recognized, threw the keys back without a word and then said, "How could you tell I was a parking attendant? Do you want a new set of seat cushions? Oh, you look like shit." Even without wringing out Henry's clothes, they were still dripping with water. So Tony Stark's feeling was indeed correct. So don't even think about getting this piece of shit stuck on your leather seats. Unless you really want to replace them, in which case I'd be happy to help you make that decision. After saying this, Henry had no intention of apologizing to Tony Stark, who finally showed up. The people inside were either rich or noble, and I had offended them myself. Perhaps it was just fate. Whether or not Master Stark was missing didn't seem to matter. If Hollywood really wants to go under, I'll find another place to stay. Can a Kryptonian like me die from holding my urine? So Henry had to bypass that flashy Ferrari and leave this fucking villa. However, this time, the departure was also not smooth. The closing gate was knocked open by a car, which stopped in the position that blocked the Ferrari's movement. Two gunmen got out of the rushing car, and one of them put his gun to Henry's head. No one is allowed to leave. The other person is naturally to control Tony Stark. Henry had no desire to be a hero. Even if his steel body could supposedly stop a bullet, he hadn't truly proven it. So, Henry didn't want to experiment at this moment. He simply raised his hands in surrender. "Tell me. Where is Josh Hilton?" asked the gunman who controlled Henry. "Who is Josh Hilton?" Henry asked innocently. In fact, the name was on the guest list he had seen, but there was no photo on the list, and Henry had no way of connecting the name he had seen with someone he didn't know. By the way, while recalling the list, Henry also noticed that there was only one person named Justin on the list, Justin Hammer. Is this the Justin Hammer I remembered? The boss of Hammer Industries, who appeared as a clown in the Iron Man movies. But this guy doesn't look like the actor I remember, Sam Rockaway, and certainly not the old man in his 60s or 70s in the comics. So, trying to recognize people by their faces really doesn't work. Henry was a little disappointed, but he glanced at Tony Stark again, trying to find some traces of Robert Downey Jr. in him. It was fine when I didn't see it, but I was shocked when I saw it. This young man didn't care about the threat of the gun at all. It could also be said that the person who approached him with a gun was too careless, shortening the distance between them to a point where they could touch each other. Tony Stark parried the threat of the gun, and with another powerful push of his hand, the opponent's weapon fell to the ground. Seeing this, the gunman who was watching Henry moved his gun away, ready to shoot anyone who dared to resist. Henry had no choice but to take action. Not only could he not let Tony Stark get shot, but he also couldn't expect these two men to be kind enough to let the other one go after they subdued the rebels, even if Henry clearly stated his surrender. After all, it's just a matter of one bullet. These two killers may not be experienced, but they don't have much psychological burden when it comes to shooting and killing people. It is said that a gun is fast from 7 steps away, and it is fast and accurate within 7 steps. But if someone dares to move the gun away at face-to-face distance, forget about speed or accuracy. Go get your head checked first. So Henry, quick-witted and quick-handed, grabbed the gun and controlled the direction of the muzzle. Then he punched his opponent's chin with moderate force, knocking him unconscious with his eyes rolled back. The gunman fainted and fell to the ground, his weapon naturally falling into Henry's hands. Meanwhile, Tony Stark was fighting with his opponent, and the passionate performance of the two of them was embarrassing for the others watching. Why is WWE wrestling, a performance-style show, so exciting to watch? Because it's a performance, making both the attacker and the defender look fantastic. But the two passers-by were swinging their fists back and forth, and the onlookers only felt embarrassed and had no other emotions. However, it was clear that Tony Stark had a foundation in boxing. It was just that after being hit a few times, his opponent stopped using boxing techniques and instead tried to catch Tony, even though he was being hit. Without a heavyweight punch that could knock out his opponent with one punch, Tony Stark could only fight his opponents relentlessly. But Tony Stark's genius brain prevented him from being unaware of the situation other than his opponent. He certainly noticed that Henry had cleanly eliminated his opponent and got the gun. "Fuck, what are you standing there for? Shoot him!" Tony shouted. This shout failed to frighten his opponent. The large man, who had come from nowhere, was determined to control the young man in front of him as quickly as possible. Henry didn't hear Tony Stark shouting shoot, so he actually shot. He pretended to aim, pretending that he couldn't aim at the unknown killer from the two people moving and changing positions. Chapter 75 Large-Scale Attack. Removing the gun, Henry said, "Do you really want me to shoot? I'm not sure who I'll hit. My selfish motive is to make Tony Stark suffer more. Anyway, these two guys' punches can't kill people. Fuck." Ah! Tony's curse came in the front, and the killer's roar came in the back. But if there were only these two opponents, and Henry defeated one of them, the audience might watch forever. If Tony Stark's ruffian face took a punch, Henry might even raise his hand and cheer. However, the Kryptonian, who had been so angry at the provocation of the fat man that he ignored the changes in the surrounding environment, now had his super senses reactivated. Henry noticed that many people were running towards the villa area in a surrounding manner. The nearest one was close to the wall and was about to climb over it. Moreover, judging from the movement postures simulated by the changes in airflow, many people have already held rifles or pistols in their hands. These people weren't tabloid paparazzi who only offered the possibility of social demise. Henry didn't think the guns they held were limited to firing BBS or paintballs. Even at the gate behind him, two cars were speeding in. Henry didn't want to gamble on whether they were his own people or the killer's camp. So, with a flick of his hand, he knocked out Tony Stark's opponent. This person just happened to maintain a flying stance, so even though Tony threw a few punches at his face, he couldn't change his direction, and he directly threw Tony to the ground, which was considered to be what he wanted. Unfortunately, Henry shot him in the chest, sending him into shock and preventing him from actually catching Tony Stark. The shot, near the small arteries of the lung, would cause massive bleeding. With prompt treatment, there's a chance of survival. However, if left untreated, the patient would only die from excessive blood loss. This was a position carefully chosen by Henry, who had read many medical books. In short, the unconscious killer was like an 80 to 90 kilogram sack of potatoes pressing down on Tony Stark. The pressure made the young man groan and struggle to utter, "Fuck." Henry went around to the other side of the car, and Tony just managed to push the person on top of him away. Seeing the blood-stained face of the young man, Henry asked, "That gunshot didn't hit you just now, did it? You damn bastard, I would rather you shoot me to death than have to be crushed by this fat pig," Tony Stark said angrily. Just when he finally freed himself, stood up, and wanted to continue chasing and scolding Henry, two more cars rushed in at the gate. The roar of the engines told everyone present that this was not a good time for flirting. Henry didn't care who Tony Stark was, he just pressed the back of his neck and ran into the villa. Because the route was just right, Tony easily picked up the pistol he had fired. "The reason why I didn't run towards the swimming pool to warn others was because people shouting loudly in the open air would be the perfect target." Henry didn't want to test his iron body in front of everyone to see whether it was really bulletproof or not, so he avoided the swimming pool and went straight into the house. As soon as he hid behind the marble cabinet, he heard gunshots from all directions. No matter how reckless Tony Stark was, he never thought of rushing out to fight with only a small pistol. Tony Stark lowered his voice and said, "I remember that at this kind of banquet, there should be security present. Shouldn't they come forward to resolve the situation?" Henry scoffed, "The banquet company doesn't allow us to bring any firearms. Do you think it's a good thing to let those rich young men get their hands on weapons? They have even less self-control than Nico. If they killed someone insignificant, that's fine. But whether they put the bullet in their own head or in another guest's body, the boss of the banquet company can prepare to go on a long vacation overseas. What you said makes me want to get a claymore mine and add a timer. It seems like a good social experiment to see if they will take the initiative to experience a real heart-pounding experience. Tony said. Given the audacity of those young men, I think this could be a great hangover cure. Even the most drunken person would instantly sober up. Don't think too highly of them, after all, some people are just as crazy even when they're not drunk. Henry's thoughtful look made Tony Stark feel uncomfortable. When a gun was pointed at his head just now, it wasn't someone else who was the first to rashly resist. Looking back now, Tony didn't know why he acted so impulsively. As if to distract himself from his embarrassment, he extended his hand to the side and said, "Tony Stark. This is my first self-introduction." Henry was very surprised. Although it was not good to let the future Iron Man's hand hang in the air, he still hesitated about whether to have anything to do with this troublemaker. Finally, Henry shook it and said, "Henry. Henry Brown." There was no celestial, earth-shaking handshake between them, no hint of destiny. It was just a touch, and that was all that mattered, mainly because Tony wasn't used to other people's body temperature. Tony skillfully half-retracted his holster, checked the bullet in the bolt, and said, "Should we take care of the killer in front first?" Shouldn't we call the police first?" Henry asked. He was also wondering, how could Iron Man be so reckless at this age? He hasn't even put on his suit yet. But it's normal when you think about it. A child who feels they haven't received their father's love and is eager to show off will do anything, even if it's a crime. However, Tony Stark had no idea that he was being manipulated by a Kryptonian who had traveled through time. He pulled out a transmitter-like device from his pocket, with a flashing red light on it that attracted attention. He said, "I've already sounded the alarm. Security will be here in 20 minutes to clean up the mess. This is much quicker than calling 911 and then arguing with the old lady at the police station. Then we should concentrate on waiting for rescue. Don't you think the enemy and us are outnumbered? And there are too many people being taken hostage. Even if you don't care about their lives and shoot at anyone you see. How many bullets do you have?" Henry had barely finished speaking when a group of people rushed into the front hall of the villa, where no one except the two of them had been hiding. As soon as they rushed in, they opened fire with rifles without giving any explanation. Although this burst of gunfire did not penetrate the marble cabinet used as a shelter, it did cause all kinds of gravel and powder to spray all over the front hall. Tony and Henry both crouched down as much as possible to reduce the area of impact. If the marble cabinet was targeted by concentrated fire, it would be shattered or even penetrated. This thing only served to obscure the view. Tony Stark asked, "You gonna sit there and wait for death?" Poof. Chapter 76 Counterattack. As soon as the attacking gunman's gunfire stopped, and the sound of a magazine being changed was heard, Tony Stark, like a god of war, slipped out from the side of the cabinet. At the same time, holding the gun in one hand, he fired repeatedly at the gunman who entered the villa. Although he wanted to continue pretending to be dead, the other person rushed out with the luck of a protagonist-level superhero, so Henry could no longer hide. A favor from someone who has been through life and death with you is still a favor. Normally, it is not easy to make a person of this level owe you a favor. Besides, if Tony gets into trouble here, who knows if old Stark will get angry and get rid of all the people involved in the villa today. Those who are rich and powerful may be able to buy their own lives. People like me who have no power and no influence can only rely on superpowers to escape. It only took a moment to weigh the pros and cons, and Henry stood up from behind the cupboard at the same time Tony rushed out. Every time the Stark young master fired a shot, Henry would watch to see if Tony's muzzle trajectory could hit anyone. If he did, he would shoot someone who wasn't aimed at him, and if he didn't, he would shoot again. This sounds magical, but with the Kryptonian's nerve reaction speed and thinking speed, this kind of thing is easy. Henry's body was like a regulator, the more focused he was, the faster his reactions became. Not only could he think more, but he could also function normally in this area, relatively speaking. To outsiders, Henry seemed to have entered some kind of superspeed realm, but in his own eyes, the world almost came to a standstill. When he was moonlighting as a stuntman or action actor, this ability allowed him to safely perform many actions that others would consider difficult. So this wasn't just a last-minute effort. Nowadays, if you want to rely on this ability to shoot people, hitting the target is the most basic thing. If others want to hit him, it is impossible, no matter how good the marksman is at aiming. In fact, if Henry relied on his super speed to blow a head off with one punch and then withstand the bullet with his body, he could do it. But he didn't want to expose his superpowers. He was already invincible by cheating with his reaction speed. It's said that people should keep a low profile. Henry certainly couldn't and didn't need to use all his superpowers on these non-threatening ordinary people. And to avoid exposing his super reaction speed, of course, he relied on his acting skills. This is the real deal. The difference between Superman and Clark Kent isn't just a suit and a pair of glasses. One of the defining characteristics of reporter Clark Kent is his clumsiness. For those who know both Superman and Clark Kent, it's hard for them to imagine that the clumsy reporter could transform into a god-like Superman once he puts on his battlesuit. If Superman's human form weren't a reporter but an actor, he would still be a top-tier actor. Henry had a deep understanding of this. In actual practice, every time Tony Stark fired a shot, Henry would slowly follow up with 1 or 2 shots. He would then deliberately empty his own gun, and then join forces with Tony to knock down all the gunmen who entered the villa through the main gate. Although not every shot was fatal, the fact that 2 men with 2 pistols knocked down 6 enemies was considered an extraordinary performance in the eyes of ordinary people. Tony Stark seemed to think that he had defeated all the enemies himself, 1 shot at a time, so he looked in Henry's direction as a demonstration. To be fair, Master Stark's pistol accuracy was quite high. At a distance of about 10 meters, he hit 4 out of 6, with 2 of the shots being fatal. So he had reason to be proud. Henry opened the holster and gave the proud young master a look. Then he stepped forward to check on the fallen gunman. He didn't shoot them one by one, so he could do it thoroughly. But he had to at least disarm them to prevent them from being shot in the back. Henry also grabbed a pistol and tossed it around. Tony came over and looked at Henry's unskilled movements, and asked with a dark face, "What are you doing?" "I'm trying to figure out how to remove the magazine and check the remaining ammunition." Tony pointed to the latch on the gun handle and said, "Press here and the magazine will be ejected." As instructed, Henry pressed the latch and the pistol's magazine ejected, but his other hand wasn't positioned under the gun to receive the magazine. So this time, he was scrambling to grab the magazine. Fortunately, he didn't let it fall to the ground. Even putting it back in, I had to push it in twice before it clicked into place. The same thing happened when I pulled the holster to load the gun. After completing the whole process, Henry finally assumed the gun-holding position. Tony Stark's face darkened as he watched him, and he rolled his eyes. He reluctantly reminded him, "Your safety isn't on." "Oh." Henry looked around before confirming the safety's position. As for the switch, there was an engraving on the gun, so there was no need to ask again. Tony Stark, unable to help himself, finally asked, "Have you ever used a gun?" Henry hesitated for a moment before saying, "Well, this is my first time today." This was the honest truth. Combined with his experiences before crossing over, Henry had only seen guns on TV and in movies. Today was his first time handling a real gun. Even in Alaska, Henry never played with John's shotgun. However, Henry's honest words made Tony Stark look upset, and he no longer looked at this comrade who seemed unreliable. If the other party could not be used to distract the opponent, he really didn't want to follow this person. Tony Stark took a pistol and put it on his waist, then took out a rifle and did not forget to take out the magazine and weigh it to ensure that there was enough ammunition. As for the rifles, he didn't let Henry take one. These captured rifles were all new gadgets, with relatively complicated structures and operations. Moreover, long guns themselves are not suitable for indoor use. In order to avoid being shot in the back, unreliable comrades are better off using pistols. For those who were still gasping and groaning on the ground, Tony Stark gave them a clean kiss with the butt of his gun, making them faint. Seeing Tony Stark's restless movements of looking around and listening attentively to the gunshots coming from other places, it was known that this man had no intention of staying and waiting for help. Henry said, "Their target isn't you, it's that guy called Josh Hilton. Are you still going to fight them anyway? Didn't you say that backup would arrive in 20 minutes? How can you be sure they won't kill everyone here to silence us? If we don't take advantage of the chaos and strike back, once they've taken control, we'll be lambs to the slaughter. With the equipment these people have, I doubt the others can last even 20 minutes. Tony glanced at Henry and said, "If you're scared, you don't have to follow." The Kryptonian was speechless. Chapter 77, The Qualities of a Hero. To become a superhero, one must have one quality, which is the courage to stand up. This is why even though Henry has the ability of a Kryptonian, he doesn't think he can become the second Superman. Because when encountering something, his first thought is to protect himself. Although the 20 years after crossing over seemed like a blank, with him either being held captive or tortured, he had lived for 30 or 40 years before crossing over, and he no longer had the youthful vigor and vitality. But Tony Stark is worthy of being the person who will become a superhero in the future. Perhaps many people think that he is just a hero hiding behind the iron armor, but they never thought that he was born surrounded by enemies and created the first simple armor to save himself. Even with the Mark 42 still charging, he still dared to rush into the enemy camp alone with weapons cobbled together from a hardware store to hunt down the culprit. The Iron Man suit is just a reflection of his financial ability. Even without the suit, he does not lack courage. But honestly, Henry felt that this teenage Tony Stark was just as reckless as a newborn calf, fearless and unafraid of a tiger. He seemed eager to prove something, easily disregarding life and death. When this man ran towards the place where the gunfire was concentrated again, Henry seriously considered whether shooting this guy in the foot would make him quiet down. But in the end Henry followed and guarded Tony's retreat. The Kryptonians now have their senses fully activated, like a human-shaped wall-penetrating radar, keeping an eye on all suspected enemies. This action made Henry sense a sense of disharmony from the enemy. They came with a purpose, and there was no doubt that their target was this banquet. But with so many people attacking, there was no central command center. Although there was tactical coordination, it seemed more like an impromptu action. The evidence is that the encirclement is not perfect. As long as you find the right direction and run hard, there is still a chance to escape. Their search inside the house was just to avoid interfering with each other, and there were always some inadvertent omissions. This reminded Henry of a gold coin he had just taken out from the fallen gunman when he was searching for a replacement pistol. He had seen the same gold coin at Tom, the human resources agent in Alaska. When he found the gold coin, he pocketed it as a trophy. Henry wasn't sure if Tony noticed. Perhaps a mere gold coin wasn't much considering his wealth. Besides, it was found on the gunman, so Tony didn't take it seriously. Looking back now, it doesn't seem strange that a killer organization exists in a high-risk world like the Marvel Universe. And it seems normal that this killer organization has a world-class scale and system. For example, the Mainland Hotel uses gold coins as bargaining chips. The bounty system at the Mainland Hotel has a unique feature: it does not prohibit multiple killers from hunting the same target. The person who can provide proof of the kill will receive the entire bounty. Therefore, the killers have to cooperate and share the bounty equally, or they can rob each other, take the money for themselves, or steal the heads, all of which are allowed under the rules. Once entering the Continental Hotel, the killers are not allowed to kill each other, which is an iron rule. Normally, targets that are too difficult to capture or have too low a reward will not attract many killers. But in today's situation, if the killer organization of the Continental Hotel is really behind this, it can only be said that the reward for the target is not low, which is why so many people are attracted here. If the above speculation is true, then the only consolation is that the quality of the assassins in the Continental Hotel varies greatly. Not everyone has the skills of Baba Yaga, aka John Wick. Just like the two gunmen we encountered in the front yard. They were clearly within arm's reach, yet they dared to casually move their guns away. It was almost like they were telling us to resist quickly. A seasoned assassin would never do such a foolish thing. Besides, the same thing happened to the 6 men who had just been knocked down. They were clearly firing rifles, but they were able to empty their magazines at almost the same time, while reloading at the same time, giving Tony Stark an opening to rush out. Perhaps these people are not lacking in the courage to kill, but if they had more experience, they would not be easily defeated by Tony Stark, a reckless young man. I hope the next enemy will be so easy to deal with, Henry thought to himself, and at the same time fired a shot at the window of the unlit room next to him. Walter. Tony immediately took cover against the wall and asked behind him. Well, I just saw a dark shadow, so I shot. But nothing happened, maybe I saw it wrong. Henry said. In fact, there was an unlucky guy who had just climbed out the window when Henry shot him on the supporting hand and he fell down. Well, the heart is still beating, so he's not dead. Tony said dissatisfiedly, be careful, don't expose us. Yes, sir. Tony Stark had just turned around and took 2 steps forward. When he passed the door of a room, Henry grabbed the back of his collar and pulled him back. At the same time, a wave of bullets came from the door, and Tony Stark was almost shot to pieces. Henry didn't explain. The pole dragged both him and Tony to the ground. At the same time, the barrage of bullets reached the wall they were leaning against, piercing the wooden partitions. The two men fell to the ground and escaped. Tony rolled aside, no longer pressing on Henry. "What is this room?" he asked. "Smoking room." "Smoking room? Why does it smell wrong?" "You know. Those really strong, addictive cigarettes." Tony understood what was going on, but he didn't criticize. Instead, he quickly turned his head and feet around, lying on the ground, and said to Henry, "Push me out." Henry understood what he meant and grabbed Tony Stark's shin with both hands and pushed forward. Tony appeared from under the doorway, raised his rifle and fired a burst of shots at the people standing with guns in the room. The sound of gunfire stopped all of a sudden. Just as Tony Stark was about to get up, Henry stepped through the doorway and fired 2 more shots at the gunman who had just jumped out from the cover of the sofa. In fact, the first shot knocked the man down, and the second shot was just a show. Tony, who had changed from lying on the ground to kneeling, saw this. Although he didn't say the word thank you, at least he didn't continue to criticize him. Tony stood up, walked around the room, and found that the people in the room were either drunk to the point of unconsciousness or had been shot in the head and would never wake up again. However, the sound of gunfire from elsewhere didn't let Tony waste much time in this room. He ran out in the direction of the gunfire. Henry, who was following behind, could only sigh, "Is this the difference between a useless person and a hero?" Chapter 78 Who is the target? The incredibly powerful Tony Stark, like a gun god, charged forward with standard tactical moves. Whenever he saw someone with a gun, he'd fire a barrage of shots, and his record was clear. In fact, it was Henry who was providing support from behind. If Tony's rifle was about to run out, he would fire another shot, sending these gunmen, who were not sure whether they were from the Continental Hotel, on their way. Along the way, it didn't seem like the other party was killing anyone. Most of the guests and receptionists at the banquet were just herded into the corners of the room like quails. The gunshots we heard earlier were mostly warning shots. A very small number of people who were mentally unstable, like those high on drugs, would rebel and get shot, and then things would quiet down. In comparison, Tony and Henry are the ruthless ones. Those who were hit by Henry still had a chance of survival as long as they were rescued in time, and there would be no doubt about their disability. Tony's shooting was not very stable. One person fell to the ground after being shot in the head, while another fell to the ground after being shot in the body, but still had a breath left. Fortunately, Tony Stark didn't have the habit of reshooting, so he rushed to eliminate the threat to the banquet as soon as possible. Finally, the two of them managed to clear the first floor of the villa. Tony also reminded those who were still alive that the Stark Industries security team would arrive shortly, and that everyone should stay where they were and hide somewhere. Of course, some brave people picked up the guns brought by the gunmen and ran out with others or alone. These people wanted to leave the villa as soon as possible to avoid being involved in the gunfight. Just as Henry couldn't stop Tony's actions, Tony Stark couldn't command this group of strangers coming from all directions. After all, everyone was only responsible for their own lives. It could be argued that the Stark young master wasn't strong enough to be a key figure in this era. Who would stay on the battlefield if they could escape? Whether to continue cleaning up the second floor or challenge the troublesome open area by the pool was not an option at all. Because Tony had already hidden at the edge of the large French window and saw the scene by the pool. The scene outside the floor-to-ceiling window was that there were two groups of people controlling everyone by the swimming pool from the front and back. The girls who were originally in the pool and on the inflatable mattresses were also driven out to the poolside. Whether they were invited guests or the receptionists and playmates sent by the banquet company, they were all crowded together. One of the groups of gunmen was questioning the group fiercely and even threatening them with a gun. Tony, who had already discarded his empty rifle and replaced it with a pistol, asked Henry, "Are you sure you can handle one of these groups?" Henry took out the magazine, took a look at it, and put it back in, saying, "I have 2 bullets left. 1 word is worth 1,000 words." Tony no longer has any hope for Henry. He is still thinking about how to deal with the gunman without hurting the hostages. Before he could find the answer, perhaps it was the earlier conversation or the sound of Henry unloading and reloading the magazine that caught the attention of the gunmen by the pool. One of them walked towards the villa and fired indiscriminately at the French windows. At the same time, a third group of gunmen entered the swimming pool area. Things took a turn for the worse. Tony Stark didn't dodge the recoil, but rushed out from the broken floor-to-ceiling window and fought back against the group of gunmen who were shooting indiscriminately. The sudden appearance of the two men also scared the gunmen near the pool. The group that was shooting randomly in particular split up to the left and right, shooting and seeking cover at the same time. The other two groups of gunmen in the distance also raised their guns and fired. Tony shot one of them while running, and Henry took care of the remaining two. The two of them rushed to a low flower bed and hid themselves. At this moment, the flower bed they were leaning against was filled with the random sounds of two gunshots. Whether it was the future Iron Man or the Kryptonian, they could only shrink as much as possible to hide behind this small flower bed. Of course, there was someone who was there to cause trouble. So Henry consciously hid in a relatively outer position to ensure that the young master of the Stark family would not scream out from being shot. Tony ejected the magazine and saw that it was empty. He only had one round left in the chamber. He asked, "Do you have any more bullets?" Henry showed his pistol, which had been unholstered, and said nothing. Then Tony cursed, "Fuck." At this time, the gunmen on the opposite side also stopped shooting. Because the sirens from the police car were ringing in the distance, the gunmen did not have much time to evacuate. The gunmen were equally anxious. Someone cursed, "Damn it! Has anyone found the target yet?" The same group of people pointed guns at the people they had restrained and shouted, "Where is Josh Hilton? Has anyone seen him? Don't think those two people can be your saviors. They can't save themselves either, you know. Maybe I don't need to keep so many people. Just one person who can speak will be enough." The new gunman said helplessly, "Doesn't anyone recognize the target's appearance?" "Fuck you. If I knew, why would I be asking for so long?" The person cursing suddenly fired a shot. It was unknown if he hit anyone, but it frightened the person being restrained and made him scream. The new group of people persuaded, "Okay, don't scare them. At least these people are loyal, which is something to be commended." "What the hell are you talking about?" Another gunshot rang out, this time accompanied by screams like a pig being slaughtered. The shooting was carried out by a new group of gunmen, and the leader said, "Josh Hilton, you have a group of good friends. But it is clear that this is not enough." "Why?" Henry, hiding behind the flower bed, recognized the little fat boy's voice. It really sounded like the sound of a pig being slaughtered. The gunman said, "Oh, you're lucky. Your employer has a special request to let you know why before they kill you. You still want to kill me? You don't think all of us came here just to make another hole in your ass? Have mercy on me, I beg you, have mercy on me. It's no use begging me for mercy because you've said too many things you shouldn't have said and let too many people know. Your employer doesn't like things getting out of control when he's not watching. You should know that. I was wrong. I won't say it again. Please forgive me this time. You're begging for mercy from the wrong person, Mr. Hilton. We're only responsible for killing you, not for forgiving you. Take my advice and go to God and confess your sins." "Wait!" Tony shouted. Just as he was about to stand up, Henry pulled him down again. At this moment, 2 bullets were fired over the 2 men's heads, clearly indicating that this group had been waiting for the 2 heroes to show up. The third gunshot silenced the fat man's screams. Chapter 79 The American police arrive late. Effective suppressive shooting and swift movement. All signs proved that the third group of people entering the scene were not at all comparable in terms of experience to the rookie shooters they had encountered before. Tony wanted to stop the other party, but hiding behind the flower bed, he was obviously suppressed by the bullets that were fired from time to time. If Henry hadn't pulled that hand just now, he would have been shot at least once. The leader of the shooting said, "The target has been eliminated. We need to evacuate. If we delay any longer, the police will come. You don't want to deal with the LAPD, do you?" A panicked gunman said, "What about the witnesses here? Silence them forever. Come on," the employer chose this occasion to make an example of him and warn others. "If you kill everyone, who will you warn? And you know the difficulty of this bounty. If any of the young men here die, we will be on the wanted list tomorrow. If you kill everyone here, we might not even survive tomorrow. Madfuck, are we leaving just like that? Don't worry. These young men are smart enough. They know what to say and what not to say. Even if they themselves don't understand, there must be someone in their family who does. If you want to stay and continue worrying about this matter, then I'll excuse myself. I need to leave first." What about the proof of kill? I'm telling you, my men will get half. I controlled these people. We also have the credit. The employer will know we succeeded after watching the news. If you want to split it, your people must return to the hotel alive. Before that, you should not be wary of me, but those who are coming now. The police car sirens stopped abruptly, confirming they had arrived at their destination. Two groups of gunmen fired 3 rapid bursts into the air, as if to notify others. The man who started the fight even shouted towards the flower bed, "We're leaving, those 2 heroes who are hiding. As long as you don't jump out to stop us, we can live in peace." Okay. This damn house. Tony wanted to stand up again, but he was pulled down by Henry as well, and then 2 familiar shots flew over his head. Mad fuck. Tony cursed. Tony Stark, knowing full well that he wasn't bulletproof, took cover behind a flower bed until a group of people arrived, shouting, "LAPD, drop your weapons. Put your hands up." Henry threw away the empty gun early and raised his hands high. Tony was simple. He also dropped his gun, half raised his hands and said, "I'm Tony Stark. I'm also a victim. I need a lawyer to be present before I say anything." With a wealthy young man standing in his way, Henry hadn't suffered much, except that he couldn't leave until the lawyers from Stark Industries arrived. In addition to the police cars, ambulances and FBI personnel also arrived at the scene. However, the largest number of people were still the Stark Industries security personnel, who simply did not have law enforcement powers. After all, the individuals involved in the case are of extraordinary status. Furthermore, it's difficult to say whether they are perpetrators or victims, and whether this poses a greater challenge to law enforcement officers. Anyway, the LAPD officers, who have seen a lot of things, were also confused by the people here. Purely wealthy people and celebrities are not people of the same level to the police. Because the latter may not be rich, and even if they are rich, they still worry about damaging their reputation, while the former do not have so many concerns. It can be imagined that celebrities have many more weaknesses than simply rich people. If celebrities gather together for a party, even if there is blasphemy, guns, or even deaths, there will be a special public relations company that comes out to clean up the mess and package the matter. If something happens to a singer, a commemorative album or concert might be released. If something happens to a movie star, a classic film might be released back in theaters. Regardless of the star, merchandise related to the star is bound to see a surge in sales. It can be said that once a star dies, business opportunities are everywhere, although you can only make this last wave of money. Even if it's just a house that collapses, the freed up resources can be used by others. Even previous investments can be recovered or transferred in countless ways. The only thing that suffers is the goods themselves. So when a celebrity gets into trouble, aside from the disappointment of their fans, it's a commercial extravaganza. The police simply need to cooperate, they're the least important part. But the people involved today are a group of young men from wealthy families, so the nature of the situation is completely different for the police. Should they be dealt with severely or let off lightly? Without knowing who the victim and the perpetrator are, the police simply can't make a judgment. Even worse, sometimes identifying someone is a taboo. So when the FBI showed up, the LAPD chief happily handed the problem over. Even though his responsibilities had increased, the Stark young master's problems had become less severe. FBI agents were more adept at handling matters at their level, while the junior police officers would be overwhelmed. So at this time, Henry and Tony, under the protection of Stark Industries security personnel, sat at the rear door of an ambulance, checking for possible injuries, while a large black paramedic fiddled with them. The 2 men watched as if they were watching a play, watching the police and FBI personnel busy in and out, while other paramedics were rescuing the injured. Those who are confirmed dead will remain where they are until the sampling personnel finish collecting evidence at the scene before their bodies are moved. No police came to question Tony. The young master had made it clear that he was waiting for a lawyer to come, so the police certainly didn't want to make things difficult for themselves. They primarily questioned the banquet company staff, who didn't have the confidence to hire lawyers out of the blue. At least they needed to clarify the circumstances and identify the relevant parties. Compared to Tony Stark, who looked calm and composed, not caring about the police and FBI agents rushing around, Henry looked a mess. The most important thing was that he was completely wet as he ran around after Tony. Although he managed to shake off a lot of water in the process, his clothes were still wrinkled and he looked extremely messy. Tony Stark looked at the mess that was his temporary comrade and suddenly asked, "Why are you helping me? Why should I help you?" Henry looked confused, not knowing the point of such a question. Tony said, "Look, after we rescued most people, they chose to run away if they had the chance. Although you didn't play much of a role, you stayed with us until the end. Speaking of which, this is our third encounter. It didn't do much. Cowgoo, you eat my Kryptonian cunt. You bastard. Without me to back you up, you'd have to have a lot more holes in your body. Don't you have any idea?" Without waiting for Henry's face to change slightly to answer, Tony asked again, "By the way, shouldn't you still be filming a movie? I remember that the filming of that movie hasn't finished yet." Chapter 80 Another Invitation. Henry got straight to the point with an embarrassed look on his face and said, "The producer fired me to avoid any more conflict with you. So, do you want me to help you get your job back?" Tony asked bluntly. Then he added, "Or maybe find you another job. First of all, I'm not asking for that." "I know, but there's no need." Henry shook his head and said, "Anyway, it's all just a matter of everyone doing it for the sake of being conservative. Even if you don't say it, those people will do the same thing if they see it. By the same token, I helped you today. As long as you don't explicitly ask everyone to target me, those people will know what to do. Even if they don't specifically leave the opportunity for me, at least they won't hinder me. That's enough." "Is that enough? You're helping me just for this?" Tony asked. Henry sneered, "Mr. Stark, please use your genius brain. Maybe we couldn't be sure at first, but now think about it, are we really in danger? The killer's target is clear, that fat guy, Josh Hilton. As long as the others cooperate and don't resist, they won't be hurt at all. Perhaps you could say that you did it to save someone. But in the end, they still succeeded in getting what they wanted, and you didn't save that fat guy, did you? In the end, your meddling only resulted in you shooting and wounding a few people, perhaps even killing them. Is that what you wanted? Tired of shooting dead targets? Now, if you have the chance to shoot a live one, you're not going to let it go. Is that right? So, my initial act of helping you wasn't actually risk-free. The danger you felt throughout the entire process was all your own fault. Well, you were the one who took the lead. And I don't even expect you to help me with my work, because my goal has become to keep you alive and avoid being implicated by you. Have you ever thought about the impact it would have if you were shot in there?" Tony said dissatisfiedly, "How could we have known the result would be like this beforehand? In the beginning, could you guarantee that these killers would not harm innocent people?" Henry shook his head honestly. Tony continued, "If that doesn't work, someone needs to step up instead of letting the bad guys get away with whatever they want. In that case, why can't that person be me? As for the question of influence, hey, do I have any influence? Tisk, the eldest son of the Stark family." Henry sneered. "It's like humans are so used to breathing air on Earth that they never think that being able to breathe air is something special. So it feels stupid to discuss with Earthlings whether air is a privilege or not. By the same token, discussing such issues with this young man would only highlight how poor I really am. Not just in terms of my wallet, but in all aspects." So the moment he figured it out, Henry felt that it was meaningless. Sure enough, he should stay away from these protagonists, so as not to be affected by their fate of being alone. Even if Iron Man is not a jinx, he is a black hole that attracts troubles, or has a physique that actively creates troubles, so we should stay away from him. Henry stood up and looked around, wanting to find a police officer or FBI agent to take his statement. He wanted to finish this quickly and go home to rest. He didn't want to sit next to a troublemaker. Seeing this, Tony asked, "What are you going to do?" "Find someone to turn themselves in, and you can kill or chop them up as you please. You're coming with me, why don't you wait for my lawyer to come? I can defend myself. The legal content is in those books anyway. A quick glance at them is enough." It was a very Versailles statement, but Tony Stark didn't think it was wrong because that was how he understood the law. He had only handed it over to a lawyer because he was too lazy to read it. What made him unhappy was that this guy had an expression as if he was avoiding the plague and was eager to stay away from him. Fortunately, geniuses usually have good memories. There are many things that Tony Stark doesn't take to heart, but when he needs them, he can still remember them. "If I say I invite you to another party, will you go?" "No, I think my physique is allergic to rich people's banquets. If I come to such banquets a few more times, I'm afraid my life will be in danger. By the way, I want to ask, do you really have no Russian blood? What you did makes people feel that you drank a bottle of vodka before coming here, and you almost shouted hurrah. Henry walked away. Tony, unusually calm in the face of Henry's teasing, simply said. The party I'm talking about isn't some messy affair like this. It's a simple gathering for dinner and conversation, hosted by one of my elders. That has even less to do with me. What can I do if I go to your old money party? Show you some monkey tricks? Or serve as an example of poverty to broaden your horizons? Henry walked away. Tony made an exaggerated expression of regret and said, what a shame. Not everyone can attend Miss Hepburn's party. Come to think of it, why would I take you there? You don't know anyone, and we can't get along. Henry walked back silently and said respectfully, Mr. Stark, I think there was a small misunderstanding between us. If this has caused you any discomfort, please accept my sincere apology. Your lawyer will be here soon, won't he? I can tell you the whole story for you, and you only need to add to it so that you don't waste too much time. Of course, I will emphasize your heroic deeds and your great sentiments. As the heir to Stark Industries, you risked your life to save so many people. Young people across America should learn from you. Oh, yes, this is Hollywood. Perhaps putting this story on the big screen, letting everyone know about your unerring marksmanship and fearless courage, would be a good idea. If you think killing too many people is bad for your image, how about this? I was the one who fired the shots. Your genius made the best judgments and saved me from danger time and time again. Without your guidance, I would have been killed by the killer's gun long ago. Henry's combo of moves stunned Tony Stark. He endured the discomfort and looked at the person in front of him with a horrified expression. Well, is that too much? Henry asked with a flattering smile. Isn't it just too much? Tony took a few steps away from the Kryptonian with a changed face and said, are you schizophrenic? Which personality do you have now? Mr. Stark, there is only me, your most loyal friend. If you think I am unworthy, then I am your most loyal servant. Henry almost rushed up to hug his thigh. Tony cursed, damn it, talk normally. Also, don't call me Mr. Stark, it reminds me of another old guy. Call me Tony, and I might consider taking you to Ms. Hepburn's party. End of the chapter. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.